What does it mean to fall into darkness? Not the darkness of night, which cradles the world in rest, nor the darkness of the earth where seeds dream of light. No, this is a deeper shadow, one that creeps into the heart, silent as a thief, and builds its throne upon the ruins of hope. In the tales of Middle-earth, there is no place where this shadow lies heavier than in Minas Morgul, the Tower of Sorcery, once called Minas Ithil, the Tower of the Moon. How does a city of light, radiant as the dreams of men, become a citadel of fear? To answer this, we must walk backward through time, tracing the steps of those who stood upon its walls, who loved its stones, and who in their silence or their striving let the shadow in. This is no mere history, no dry recounting of years and wars. It is a journey into the soul of a place, and through it, into the soul of ourselves. For Minas Morgul is not just a tower in a far-off land. It is a mirror reflecting the choices we make when the world grows dim. Let us begin then, not with the clash of swords or the fall of kings, but with a quiet truth. Every fall begins with a single step, and every step is taken in the heart. In the beginning, Minas Ithil was a song of stone, built by the hands of Númenóreans, those men of the west whose hearts still burned with the memory of starlight. It stood in the valley of Ithilien, where the moon's silver kissed the river Anduin. Its towers gleamed like alabaster, catching the light of Anor and Ithil alike, a beacon of hope in the shadow of Mordor. The men who dwelt there were not mere warriors. They were poets, scholars, dreamers. They walked beneath the white tree of Gondor planted in the courtyard and saw in its blossoms a promise of renewal. To them, Minas Ithil was a vow that light would endure, that beauty would not fade, that the world could be made whole. Yet even in those days there was a whisper of unease. Beyond the Efelduath, the mountains of shadow, lay Mordor, the land of Sauron, whose eye never slept. The men of Minas Ithil knew this. They felt it in the stillness of the night when the wind carried strange echoes from the east. They saw it in the eyes of their children, who asked why the stars seemed dimmer over the mountains. And they heard it in the tales of their kin, who spoke of a darkness that was not mere absence of light, but a presence, a will, a hunger. This was the first truth of Minas Ithil: to live in the light is to know the shadow. Not to see it, not yet, but to sense it like a weight upon the soul. The men of the city were not fools. They built their walls high, their gates strong. They forged swords and sang songs of defiance. But defiance alone does not hold back the tide. The shadow does not come with trumpets or banners. It comes in the quiet moments, in the doubts that linger after the songs have faded, in the choices that seem small but echo through the ages. Consider Isildur, son of Elendil, who walked the streets of Minas Ithil in its youth. He was a man of great heart, a king in waiting whose love for his people was as fierce as the sea. Yet even he in his strength carried a wound. The fall of Númenor, his ancestral home, was a scar upon his spirit. He had seen the pride of men lead to ruin, had watched the waves swallow the land of his fathers. In Minas Ithil he sought to build anew, to prove that men could rise above their past. But the memory of loss is a heavy burden, and burdens, if not borne with care, can bend even the mightiest. Isildur's city was a marvel, but it was also a challenge. To stand so close to Mordor was to dare the darkness to come. And come it did not in a single moment, but in 1,000 small ways. A scout who did not return, a harvest that withered too soon, a dream that left the sleeper cold. These were the first threads of the shadow, woven so subtly that none could name them for what they were. The people of Minas Ithil did not falter. They stood watch, they prayed, they loved. But in their hearts, a question began to form. How long can we hold? This question is the second truth. Fear begins not with defeat, but with the thought of it. To imagine loss is to invite it, not because the thought itself has power, but because it shifts the soul. It turns the eye inward away from the light, and in that turning, the shadow finds its foothold. The men of Minas Ithil did not speak of fear, not yet. They spoke of duty, of honor, of the legacy of their fathers. But duty can become a chain honor, a mask, and legacy a weight too heavy to bear. Let us pause here in the early days of Minas Ithil and consider the nature of fear. It is not a monster that strides boldly into the heart. It is a whisper, a doubt, a silence, where once there was song. In the halls of Minas Ithil, the silence grew. Not all at once, not in a way that could be measured, but as the years passed, the laughter of children seemed softer, the tales of the elders more somber. The white tree still bloomed, but its petals fell faster, as if weary of the world. The men of the city were vigilant, but vigilance is a double-edged sword. To watch for the enemy is to see enemies everywhere. The guards upon the walls began to see shapes in the mist, to hear voices in the wind. They did not speak of this, for to speak would be to admit weakness, and weakness was unthinkable. So they stood silent, their eyes fixed on the horizon, while within them the shadow grew. This is the third truth. Silence is the shadow's ally. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of unspoken fears, of burdens carried alone. In Minas Ithil, the people did not share their doubts. They did not gather in the courtyard to speak of the weight upon their hearts. They were proud, and pride bids us hide our wounds. But hidden wounds fester, and in the quiet of their hearts the men of Minas Ithil began to change. They began to see the world as a place of threats, not promises. They began to measure their strength not by their love, but by their swords. They began to forget the songs of their fathers, the ones that spoke of starlight and hope, and to sing instead of war and endurance. These were not great changes, not yet. A city does not fall in a day, but the seeds of Minas Morgul were sown in those silent years when the light of Minas Ithil began to dim, not from without, but from within. Now let us turn to the War of the Last Alliance, for it was in this time that the shadow showed its face. Sauron the Dark Lord rose in Mordor, and his armies poured forth like a tide of iron and fire. Minas Ithil stood in his path, a beacon of defiance, and he could not abide its light. The city was besieged, its walls battered, its people tested. Isildur fought with the strength of his fathers, but the enemy was vast, and the heart of Sauron was a furnace of malice. In the end, Minas Ithil fell, not to swords alone, but to despair. The white tree was burned, the towers broken, the people scattered or slain. Isildur fled, bearing the shards of his father's sword, and the city was left to the mercy of the enemy. Sauron's servants took its halls, and the light of the moon was drowned in shadow. This was the first great wound, the moment when Minas Ithil ceased to be a home and became a prize. Yet even in this defeat there was hope. The Last Alliance. The union of elves and men rose to challenge Sauron. Gil-galad and Elendil, with Isildur at their side, marched to Mordor, and in the shadow of Mount Doom they broke the Dark Lord's power. Sauron was cast down, his spirit fled, and Minas Ithil was reclaimed. The city was rebuilt, its walls raised anew, its tree replanted. The people returned, and for a time the light seemed to return with them. But the fourth truth is this: a wound does not heal simply because the blade is gone. The stones of Minas Ithil were mended, but the hearts of its people carried the memory of loss. They had seen their city fall, had felt the shadow's touch. They could rebuild the towers, but they could not rebuild the trust, the faith, the certainty that had once defined them. The songs they sang were now laced with sorrow, the laughter tinged with caution. They were a people who had known fear, and that knowledge changed them. Isildur too was changed. In the moment of victory, he stood before the One Ring, the heart of Sauron's power. He could have destroyed it, could have ended the shadow forever, but he did not. He took the ring, claiming it as his own, a were-guild for his father's death. This was the fifth truth. Temptation is the shadow's greatest weapon, not the temptation of power alone, but the temptation to hold on to pain, to let it define us, to make it our legacy. Isildur's choice was not just a failure of will, it was a failure of vision. He saw the ring as a tool, a treasure, a right. He did not see that it was a chain binding him to the very darkness he had fought. The years that followed were a time of uneasy peace. Minas Ithil stood once more, but it was not the city of old. The people who dwelt there were watchful, their eyes ever turned to the east. They rebuilt their lives, but they did so in the shadow of memory. The tales they told their children were no longer of hope, but of endurance. The songs they sang were of battles won, not of beauty cherished. They were a people waiting for the next blow, and in that waiting they began to lose themselves. This is the sixth truth: to live in fear is to become its servant. Not all at once, not in a way that can be named, but slowly, inevitably. The men of Minas Ithil did not bow to Sauron. They did not worship the shadow. But they began to see the world through its eyes. They began to measure their worth by their strength, their safety by their walls, their future by their past. They began to forget what it meant to live, not just to survive. And in the east the shadow stirred. Sauron was not destroyed, only diminished. His spirit lingered, and with it his will. He did not need armies to reclaim Minas Ithil. He needed only time and the slow corrosion of the heart. The city stood, but it was hollow, a shell of its former self. The white tree withered its roots, starved of faith. The towers gleamed, but their light was cold, like the moon before a storm. The people endured, but they did not thrive. They were a city of silence, and in that silence the shadow grew. Let us linger here in the twilight of Minas Ithil before it became Minas Morgul. Let us walk its streets, feel the weight of its stones, hear the whispers of its people. They are not so different from us. They loved, they dreamed, they hoped. But they also feared, and in their fear they began to lose what they held dear. This is the seventh truth: the shadow does not need to conquer us to win. It needs only to make us forget who we are. The story of Minas Ithil is not yet finished. The city will fall again, its name will change, its light will be swallowed by sorcery. But that is a tale for another hour. For now, let us hold this moment, this fragile time when the city still stood, when the choice was still theirs. Let us ask ourselves, what would we have done? Would we have sung louder, loved fiercer, spoken the fears that weighed upon us? Or would we too have fallen silent, letting the shadow creep in one step at a time? The journey to Minas Morgul is a journey into the heart. It is a path we all walk in one form or another. The city is not just a place. It is a question, a challenge, a warning. How do we resist the darkness? Not with swords alone, not with walls or wars, but with the choices we make in the quiet moments when no one is watching, when the world seems to hold its breath. This is the eighth truth: the light endures only as long as we carry it, not in our hands, but in our hearts. Minas Ithil was not lost because Sauron was strong, but because its people forgot what the light meant. They forgot the songs, the dreams, the promises. They forgot that to live in the light is not to be free of shadow, but to choose every day to turn toward it. As we leave this first chapter of our tale, let us carry this question with us. What is the light we hold? For each of us, it is different: a memory, a hope, a love, a faith. But for each of us, it is also the same. It is the part of us that refuses to bow, that sings in the silence, that dares to dream, even when the world grows dim. Minas Ithil stood for a time, and then it fell. But its story is not over, and neither is ours. The shadow waits patient as stone, silent as the grave, but so too does the light. And in the space between them we walk, we choose, we become. Let us walk on then into the next chapter of this tale, where the city of the moon will face its darkest hour, and where we perhaps will find our own. The tale of Minas Ithil continues not with the clash of armies or the fall of towers, but with the slow, silent turning of hearts. The city stands, yet its alabaster walls catching the moonlight, its white tree clinging to life in the courtyard. But the shadow, once a whisper, now lingers like a mist, curling through the streets, seeping into the dreams of those who dwell within. The question remains, how does a city of light become a citadel of fear? To answer, we must walk deeper into the years that followed the War of the Last Alliance, when the men of Gondor reclaimed their tower, yet carried within them the seeds of its undoing. This is no mere chronicle of events, but a meditation on the burdens we bear, the choices we make, and the silences we allow to grow. Minas Ithil is not just a place, It is a mirror reflecting the fragility of hope, the weight of legacy, and the subtle ways in which we surrender to the dark. Let us tread softly then, for the ground we walk is sacred, and the truths we uncover are as sharp as any blade. The years after the last alliance were a time of rebuilding, but not of renewal. Minas Ithil, reclaimed from Sauron's grasp, stood once more as a beacon of Gondor's strength. Its walls were mended, its gates reinforced, its towers raised higher than before. The men who returned to the city were not the dreamers of old, but survivors, their faces etched with the memory of siege and loss. They planted a new white tree, a sapling from the line of Nimloth, and saw in its fragile branches a symbol of their endurance. Yet symbols like stones can be hollow things, and the heart of Minas Ithil was not what it had been. The men of the city were ruled now by the heirs of Isildur, kings and stewards, who bore the weight of a crown forged in victory, but tempered by betrayal. Isildur's choice to keep the One Ring had not destroyed Gondor, but it had left a wound, a crack in the foundation of their hope. His sons, who ruled in his stead, carried this legacy, not the ring itself, for it was lost in the Gladden fields, but the shadow of its temptation. They were kings of men proud and resolute, but they were also human, and humanity is a fragile thing, prone to doubt, to pride, to the slow erosion of faith. In the halls of Minas Ithil, the kings walked with heavy steps. They spoke of duty, of vigilance, of the need to hold the line against Mordor. They pointed to the east, where the mountains of shadow loomed, and swore that never again would the city fall. But their words were like the wind stirring the air, but leaving no mark. The people listened, they nodded, they took up their swords and their watch. But in their hearts a new silence grew, one born not of fear, but of weariness. This is the ninth truth. The heaviest burden is not the one we carry, but the one we inherit. The men of Minas Ithil did not choose the war that had scarred their city, nor the choice that had spared Sauron's power. Yet they lived in its shadow, and that shadow shaped them. They were a people defined by what had been, not what could be. Their songs were of past glories, their dreams of past promises. They did not look to the future, for the future was a horizon too vast, too uncertain. Instead, they looked to the past, and in doing so, they began to lose their way. Consider Anarion, Isildur's brother, whose line ruled Minas Ithil in those years. He was a man of wisdom, a king who loved his people as a father loves his children. Yet even he could not escape the weight of his father's legacy. Elendil, the great king, had fallen before Sauron, and his shadow loomed large over his sons. Anarion ruled with justice, with strength, but also with a quiet sorrow. He had seen the city fall, had watched the white tree burn. He had fought to reclaim it, but the victory tasted of ash. The city was his, but it was not whole, and he knew it. Anarion's sons, and their sons after them, inherited this sorrow. They were kings of a city that stood on the edge of the abyss, a city that could never forget its wounds. They built higher walls, forged stronger swords, trained their armies to march in perfect order. But these were the acts of men who feared loss, not of men who believed in life. The city became a fortress, its beauty secondary to its strength. The white tree was tended, but it was a relic, not a living thing. The people were protected, but they were not inspired. This is the 10th truth: to guard against loss is not to live. The kings of Minas Ithil were not weak, nor were they cruel. They were diligent, they were brave, but they ruled from a place of caution, not of courage. Courage dares to dream, to risk, to love. Caution builds walls, counts swords, measures days. The men of Minas Ithil were cautious, and in their caution they began to forget what it meant to be a city of light. The people too felt this change. They went about their lives, they tilled the fields of Ithilien, they raised their children. But the joy of old was dimmed. The festivals that once filled the courtyard with song were quieter now, the dances slower. The tales told by the hearth were of battles endured, not of hopes cherished. The children who played beneath the white tree did not ask of the stars, but of the shadows. and their questions went unanswered. In the silence of those years, the shadow grew. Not Sauron himself, for he was still a spirit weak and formless, biding his time. But the shadow is more than a single will. It is a force, a current, a tide that flows through the cracks in the heart. In Minas Ithil, those cracks were many. The people did not worship the dark, they did not turn from their duty. But they began to see the world as a place of threats, not of promises. They began to measure their days by what they could keep, not what they could create. Let us walk now through the streets of Minas Ithil in the time of its second waning. The city is still beautiful, its towers catching the moon's silver, its river singing softly as it flows. But there is a chill in the air, a weight that cannot be named. The guards upon the walls stand tall, but their eyes are weary. The merchants in the market smile, but their laughter is forced. The priests who tend the white tree pray, but their voices are soft as if afraid to be heard. This is the 11th truth. The shadow does not come as an enemy, but as a guest. It does not break the gates, it slips through them cloaked in familiarity. In Minas Ithil, the shadow came as doubt, as weariness, as the slow fading of hope. The people did not see it, for it wore their own faces. It spoke in their own voices, whispering of the need to be strong, to be safe, to be certain. And in listening they began to change. The kings of Minas Ithil and Arian's heirs felt this change most keenly. They were men of Gondor, proud and noble, but they were also men of their time. They saw the world through the lens of their fathers' wars, their fathers' losses. They knew the tales of Sauron, of the ring, of the price paid for victory. They vowed to be different, to be stronger, to hold the line where Isildur had faltered. But vows are fragile things, and the weight of a crown can crush even the strongest heart. One such king was Meneldyl, son of Anarion, who ruled in the early years of the Third Age. He was a man of great learning, a scholar as well as a warrior. He loved Minas Ithil not just as a city, but as an idea, a testament to the endurance of men. Yet he also feared for it. He saw the fragility of its light, the nearness of Mordor's shadow. He strengthened the city's defences, he trained its armies, he sent scouts to watch the passes of the Efelduath. But in his vigilance he began to lose sight of the city's soul. Meneldil's reign was one of order, but not of inspiration. He ruled with precision, with care, but also with distance. He did not walk among his people as his fathers had. He did not sing with them nor share their stories. He was a king, and kings must stand apart. But in standing apart he left his people alone, and in their aloneness the shadow found its voice. This is the 12th truth. Leadership is not a crown, but a fire. A true leader does not command. They kindle. They light the way, not with swords or laws, but with hope, with love, with the courage to dream. Meneldil was a good king, but he was not a light. He protected his people, but he did not lift them. And in the absence of that lifting, the city began to sink. The years passed, and the shadow grew, not in great deeds, but in small ones. A guard who turned his eyes from the east, weary of watching. A mother who told her child to stay within the walls, fearing the open fields. A priest who prayed for strength, but not for joy. These were the threads of the shadow, woven so finely that none could see the pattern. The city stood its walls unbreached, its gates unbroken. But it was no longer a city of light. It was a city of endurance, of waiting, of holding on. In this time the white tree began to fail. Its leaves fell too soon, its branches grew brittle. The priests tended it, they watered its roots, they spoke the old prayers. But the tree was not just a plant, it was a symbol, a living link to the hope of Numenor. And hope cannot be tended with duty alone. The people saw the tree's decline, and they did not speak of it. To speak would be to admit that something was wrong, and they could not bear that truth. So they turned their eyes away, and in their silence the shadow deepened. This is the 13th truth. To ignore a wound is to invite it to grow. The men of Minas Ithil were not blind. They saw the tree's decay, they felt the city's weariness. But they chose not to see, not to feel. They chose to endure, to carry on, to hold the line. And in that choice, they began to lose what they sought to protect. The kings too saw the trees decline, but they did not act. They were men of action, of war, of strategy. They knew how to fight an enemy, how to build a wall, how to lead an army. But they did not know how to heal a heart. They did not know how to sing, how to dream, how to kindle the light that had once defined their city. They were kings, but they were also men, and men are frail, prone to the weight of their own fears. Let us pause here in the fading light of Minas Ithil and consider the nature of legacy. The city was built to be a beacon, a testament to the strength and hope of men. But legacies are not stone, they are living things shaped by the hands that carry them. The men of Minas Ithil carried their legacy with pride, but also with fear. They feared to fail, to lose, to be less than their fathers, and in that fear they began to falter. This is the 14th truth. A legacy is not a gift, but a task. It is not enough to inherit the light. We must tend it, feed it, share it. The men of Minas Ithil inherited a city of beauty, but they did not know how to keep it beautiful. They guarded its stones, but not its spirit. They held its walls, but not its dreams. And in their guarding, they began to lose what they loved. The shadow, ever patient, watched this slow decline. It did not need to strike, not yet. It needed only to wait, to whisper, to let the men of Minas Ithil undo themselves. Sauron's spirit, though weakened, was not gone. It lingered in the east, a will without form, a hunger without end. It saw the cracks in the city's heart, the silences in its halls, the weariness in its people, and it smiled, for it knew that time was its ally. Now let us turn to a moment, a single thread in the tapestry of Minas Ithil's fall. In the reign of a later king whose name is lost to the mists of time, a stranger came to the city. He was no warrior, no lord, but a wanderer clad in grey, his eyes bright with a light that seemed older than the stars. Some say he was a lawmaster, others a prophet, others still a servant of the Valar. He walked the streets of Minas Ithil, and he saw what others did not, the shadow in the silence, the weight in the hearts, the fading of the light. The wanderer stood before the white tree, now frail and leafless, and he wept, not for the tree alone, but for the people who had let it die. He spoke to the king, and his words were soft but sharp as a blade. "You guard the city," he said, "but you do not love it. You hold the walls, but you do not hold the light. You are kings, but you are not kindlers. Turn your eyes from the east and look within. The shadow is not in Mordor alone. It is here in the silence of your hearts." The king listened, but he did not hear. He was a man of duty, of pride, of legacy. He thanked the wanderer, gave him bread and wine, and sent him on his way. The people whispered of the stranger's words, but they did not act. To act would be to admit weakness, to confess that the city was failing. And they could not bear that truth. So they returned to their watch, their work, their waiting. And the wanderer left his steps, fading into the night, his warning unheeded. This is the 15th truth. The light speaks, but we must listen. The wanderer was a voice of hope, a chance to turn, to heal, to remember. But hope is a fragile thing, and it requires courage to embrace. The men of Minas Ithil were brave, but they were not courageous. They fought, but they did not dream. They endured, but they did not live. And in their endurance, they began to fade. The years rolled on, and the city grew quieter still. The white tree stood bare, its roots dry, its branches broken. The towers gleamed, but their light was cold, like a star seen through a storm. The people lived, but they did not thrive. They were a city of shadows, not yet fallen, but falling step by silent step. The kings ruled, but they did not lead. They were men of stone guarding a city of stone, and the shadow watched patient as death. This is the 16th truth. The fall of a city is not a moment but a process. It is not a battle lost but a heart surrendered. Minas Ithil was not yet Minas Morgul, but it was no longer itself. It was a city caught between light and shadow, between hope and fear, between the past and the future. And in that between, it began to lose its way. Let us hold this moment, this twilight of Minas Ithil, as we prepare to walk deeper into its tale. The city stands, but it is fragile, its light flickering like a candle in the wind. The shadow waits, not with armies, but with whispers, with doubts, with the slow erosion of the soul. The men of Minas Ithil are not yet lost, but they are losing, and the choices they make in the years to come will shape their fate and ours.
What is the light we carry? What is the shadow we fear? These are the questions that Minas Ithil asks, not just of its people, but of us all. Let us carry them with us as we step into the next chapter of this journey, where the city of the moon will face its greatest test, and where the heart of its people will be laid bare.
The tale of Minas Ithil weaves on a thread of light fraying in the gathering dusk. The city stands its towers still proud against the moonlit sky, yet the heart within its walls beats faintly like a drum muffled by sorrow. The white tree is barren, its roots starved of faith, and the people move through their days as if bound by an unseen chain. The question lingers heavy as stone. How does a city of radiance become a citadel of fear? To seek the answer, we must journey deeper into the Third Age, where the shadow patient and cunning tightens its grip not with fire or sword, but with the slow theft of memory, the fading of songs, and the choices that turn hope to ash. This is no mere recounting of years, but a pilgrimage into the soul of a place and its people. Minas Ithil is a parable, a mirror held to our own hearts, asking what we cling to when the light dims and what we lose when we forget to sing. Let us walk this path with care, for the truths we uncover are ancient and they cut deep. The years after Meneldil's reign were a time of quiet decay. Minas Ithil endured its walls, unbreached its gates, steadfast. The men of Gondor, heirs of Numenor's glory, held their watch over the valley of Ithilien, their eyes fixed on the mountains of shadow. Mordor was silent, its fires dim its master, a formless spirit lurking in the east. Yet the absence of war did not bring peace. The city was a fortress now, its beauty a memory, its purpose reduced to defiance. The people lived, they worked, they prayed, but their lives were shaped by what they feared, not what they loved. The kings who ruled Minas Ithil were men of duty, their crowns heavy with the weight of their fathers' vows. They were not tyrants, nor were they weak. They were vigilant, their councils filled with plans to strengthen the city's defences, to train its armies, to secure its borders. They spoke of Gondor's glory, of the legacy of Elendil, of the need to stand firm against the shadow. But their words were like echoes in a hollow hall, stirring the air, but touching no hearts. The people nodded, they obeyed, they took up their tasks. But in their silence, a void grew, a space where once there had been laughter stories and the songs of old. This is the 17th truth: the shadow thrives where memory fades. The men of Minas Ithil were not conquered, they were not broken, but they began to forget. They forgot the songs their ancestors sang beneath the stars of Numenor, songs of the sea, of the valor, of the light that endures. They forgot the tales of hope of Eärendil, who bore a Silmaril to the heavens, of Beren and Luthien, who defied death for love. They forgot the dreams that had built their city, dreams of a world made whole, of a beauty that could not be taken. In their place, they told stories of war, of survival, of holding the line. And in forgetting, they began to lose themselves. Let us linger in the streets of Minas Ithil in this time of fading memory. The city is still fair, its stones polished by the hands of craftsmen, its river sparkling under the moon. But the air is heavy, as if the world holds its breath. The market is busy, but the voices are subdued, the smiles fleeting. The children play, but their games are of soldiers and sieges, not of heroes and quests. The priests tend the barren white tree, their prayers a ritual, not a plea. The guards stand upon the walls, their armor gleaming, but their eyes are distant, as if searching for something they cannot name. In the great hall of the king, a fire burns, but it gives little warmth. The king, let us call him Ur, a name that echoes through the annals of Gondor, sits upon his throne, his brow furrowed, his hands clasped tightly. He is young, strong, a warrior born, yet his heart is old, weighed by the tales of his fathers. He knows the history of Minas Ithil, its founding, its fall, its reclamation. He knows the shadow that waits beyond the mountains, the enemy that never truly dies. He vows to be ready to be stronger than those who came before, to hold the city against all odds. But his vows are chains binding him to a past he cannot escape.
Ur is not alone in his burden. His counselors, his captains, his people all carry the same weight. They are a city of memory but not of hope. They remember the wars, the losses, the narrow victories. They remember the white tree burning, the towers falling, the screams in the night. These memories are their shield, their strength, their reason to endure. But memories, if not tempered by dreams, become cages. The people of Minas Ithil were caged not by walls, but by the past, and in their cage the shadow found its home. This is the 18th truth: to live in the past is to invite the shadow. The men of Minas Ithil were not fools. They knew the dangers of Mordor, the malice of Sauron. But they fought the wrong battle. They fought the enemy of yesterday, not the enemy of today. They built walls against armies, but the shadow came as a whisper, a doubt, a fading song. They guarded their city, but they did not guard their hearts. In this time, a new threat emerged, not from without, but from within. The people began to turn inward, their trust eroding like stone worn by the river. Neighbors grew wary of neighbors, fearing betrayal, fearing weakness. The guards upon the walls began to question the loyalty of those they protected, wondering if the shadow had already taken root. The priests, once voices of unity, became voices of judgment, warning of divine wrath, of the need to purify the city's soul. The king, once a symbol of strength, became a figure of suspicion, his every decision weighed against the failures of his fathers. This division was the shadow's work, subtle and insidious. Sauron needed no armies to weaken Minas Ithil. He needed only to sow discord to let the people undo themselves. The shadow whispered in the night, in the dreams of the weary, in the silences between words. It spoke of fear, of scarcity, of the need to protect what little remained. And the people listened, not because they were evil, but because they were human, and humans are frail, prone to the weight of their own doubts. This is the 19th truth the shadow divides to conquer. It does not need to strike. It needs only to separate. In Minas Ithil, the people were not at war with each other, not yet. But they were no longer one. They were a city of fragments, each man, each woman, each child, carrying their own burden, their own fear, their own silence. And in that fragmentation, the light began to fade. The white tree, once a symbol of unity, became a symbol of loss. The people no longer gathered beneath its branches. They passed it by their eyes, averted, as if its barrenness were a judgment upon them. The priests still prayed, but their words were hollow, their rituals empty. The tree was dying, and with it the city's soul. Yet none spoke of it, for to speak would be to admit the truth, and the truth was too heavy to bear. Let us turn now to a moment in this twilight, a single spark in the gathering dark. In the reign of Ur, a woman rose among the people, a healer named Lorindel. She was no queen, no warrior, but her hands were gentle, her eyes bright with a fire that seemed to pierce the gloom. She walked the streets of Minas Ithil, tending the sick, comforting the weary, singing songs of old to the children who had never heard them. Her voice was soft, but it carried like a breeze through a silent forest, stirring the leaves of forgotten hope. Lorindel saw the city's wounds not in its walls, but in its people. She saw the fear in their eyes, the silence in their hearts, the weight of their unshared burdens. She spoke to them not of duty or defiance, but of love, of beauty, of the light that still lingered in the world. She sang of the stars, of the rivers, of the dreams that had built Minas Ithil. She told stories of Númenor, not of its fall, but of its glory, of the men and women who had dared to dream of a better world. For a time, her voice was a beacon.
The people gathered to hear her, their faces softening, their eyes brightening. The children laughed again. The elders smiled. The guards upon the walls stood a little taller. Lorindel was no saviour, no prophet sent by the Valar, but she was a reminder, a living memory of what the city had been and what it could be. She was a song, and songs have power even in the darkest hours.
But songs, like sparks, are fragile things. The King Ernur heard of Lorindel's gatherings, and he grew wary. He was a man of war, of strategy, of order. He saw in her songs not hope, but distraction. He feared that her words would weaken the city's resolve, that her dreams would soften its steel. He called her to his hall, and there, in the shadow of his throne, he spoke to her. "Your songs are fair," he said, "but they are not what we need. We need strength, not dreams. We need swords, not stories. Sing no more, lest you lead us to ruin."
Lorindel bowed, but her eyes did not waver. "My king," she said, "a city without songs is already ruined. A people without dreams are already lost. I sing not to weaken, but to strengthen. I sing to remind us who we are." Her words were soft, but they struck like a bell, clear and true. Yet Ernur did not hear. He was a king, and kings are often deaf to the voices of the heart. He sent her away, and though he did not banish her, his command was clear: be silent or be gone. Lorindel did not leave. She walked the streets still, her songs quieter now, sung in the homes of the poor, in the shadows of the market, in the moments when no guards were near. But the spark she had kindled began to fade. The people, fearing the king's displeasure, turned from her. They loved her songs, but they loved their safety more. They needed her hope, but they needed their walls more. And so, one by one, they fell silent, and Lorindel's voice was left to echo alone.
This is the 20th truth. The light is fragile, and fear is strong. Lorindel was a gift, a chance to remember to heal, to turn back from the edge. But gifts must be accepted, and the people of Minas Ithil were too weary, too afraid to take her hand. They chose silence not because they were cruel, but because they were human, and humans cling to what they know, even when it leads to ruin.
The years passed, and the city grew darker still. The white tree was a skeleton now, its branches like bones against the sky. The towers stood, but their light was cold, like a moon shrouded in cloud. The people lived, but their lives were small, their dreams smaller. They were a city of duty, of endurance, of waiting for a blow that had not yet come. And in their waiting, they began to change. The shadow, ever patient, watched this change. It did not need to act, not yet. It needed only to whisper, to let the people weave their own chains. Sauron's spirit, though formless, was growing stronger, fed by the discord in the west, by the silence in the east. He saw the city's heart, its fractures, its fears. He saw the king, proud but alone, ruling a people who no longer sang. He saw the white tree dead, but untended, a symbol of a hope forgotten. And he waited, for he knew that the city was falling not to swords, but to itself. In this time, a new rumour began to spread. Scouts returned from the mountains of shadow, their faces pale, their voices trembling. They spoke of lights in the east, green and cold, flickering like corpse candles. They spoke of voices in the wind, not human, not elven, but something older, hungrier. They spoke of a presence, a weight that pressed upon the soul, as if the air itself were watching. The king heard these reports, and his heart grew heavy. He strengthened the walls, he doubled the watch, he sent more scouts to the passes. But he did not speak to his people, for to speak would be to admit fear, and fear was a crack in the armour of a king. This is the 21st truth. Fear unspoken is fear unchallenged. The men of Minas Ithil were not weak. They faced the rumours, they held their posts, they carried on. But they did not share their fears, did not gather to face them together. They were a city of individuals, each bearing their own burden, each fighting their own shadow, and in their solitude the shadow grew. Let us walk now to the edge of Minas Ithil, where the walls meet the wilds of Ithilien. The river Anduin flows its song softer now, as if wary of being heard. The fields are green, but they are empty. The farmer's gone to the safety of the city. The moon rises, but its light is dim, as if veiled by an unseen hand. The guards stand their hands tight on their swords, their eyes scanning the dark. They are brave, but they are alone, and in their aloneness they are vulnerable. In the heart of the city, the king sits his councillors around him, their voices low. They speak of strategy, of supplies, of the need to hold the line. They do not speak of the white tree, of the songs that have faded, of the hope that is slipping away. They are men of action, but their actions are hollow, for they fight a shadow, they cannot see a shadow that is already within. And in the homes of the people the silence grows. The children no longer play beneath the tree. They hide in the shadows, their games forgotten. The elders no longer tell tales. They sit by the hearth, their eyes distant. The mothers and fathers work, they pray, they endure, but they do not dream. They are a people waiting not for victory, but for the end. This is the 22nd truth: a city without dreams is a city lost. Minas Ithil was not yet Minas Morgul, but it was no longer a city of light. It was a city of shadows, of silences, of forgotten songs. The people were not defeated, but they were defeated. Their hearts turned inward, their hope turned to ash. As we leave this chapter of the tale, let us carry with us the echo of Lorindel's song, faint but unbroken. The city stands, but it is crumbling not from without, but from within. The shadow waits patient, as stone cunning as the night. The people endure, but they do not live. And the king, proud and alone, rules a city that is slipping from his grasp. What is the song we sing? What is the hope we hold? These are the questions that Minas Ithil asks, not just of its people, but of us all. The city is a mirror reflecting the choices we make, the silences we keep, the dreams we let fade. Let us walk on then into the next chapter of this journey, where the shadow will show its face, and where the heart of Minas Ithil will face its final test. The song of Minas Ithil falters, its notes scattered by a wind that carries the chill of the east. The city stands its towers defiant against the creeping dusk, yet within its walls the light grows thin, stretched taut like a thread on the verge of breaking. The white tree is a ghost, its branches bare, its roots forgotten, and the people move as shadows of themselves, their hearts bound by duty, their voices stilled by fear. The question persists, ancient and unyielding. How does a city of moonlight become a citadel of dread? To answer, we must tread deeper into the Third Age, where the shadow, subtle as a serpent, weaves its spell, not through conquest, but through the allure of strength, the seduction of certainty, and the slow betrayal of the soul. This is no mere tale of a city's fall, but a reflection on the choices that shape us, the temptations that draw us, and the truths we bury in the name of survival. Minas Ithil is a mirror revealing the cost of clinging to power when love has faded, of choosing might over mercy, of forsaking the heart for the sword. Let us walk this path with reverence, for the ground is fragile and the lessons are sharp as starlight. The years have worn Minas Ithil like a stone smoothed by the river. The city endures its gates, barred its walls, unyielding, a bulwark against the shadow that waits beyond the Ephel-Duath. Mordor is quiet. Its fires banked its master, a whisper in the dark. Yet the silence is not peace. It is a pause, a held breath, a moment before the plunge. The men of Gondor, heirs of Númenor's pride, hold their watch, their eyes fixed on the east, their hands tight on their swords. They are vigilant, they are resolute, but they are also weary, their spirits eroded by the weight of endless waiting. The kings who rule Minas Ithil are men of iron forged in the memory of war. They are not the dreamers who built the city, nor the poets who sang beneath its white tree. They are warriors, their crowns not symbols of hope, but of burden. They speak of Gondor's strength, of the need to stand firm, to be unbreakable. They build higher walls, forge sharper blades, train their armies to march as one. They are not cruel, nor are they unjust. They are protectors, guardians of a city that teeters on the edge of the abyss. But protection, if it is all a city knows, becomes a cage, and cages breed despair. This is the 23rd truth: strength without heart is a hollow thing. The men of Minas Ithil were strong, their walls impregnable, their armies fierce. But strength alone does not make a city live. It does not kindle the soul, nor mend the spirit. It does not sing, nor dream, nor love. The people of Minas Ithil were guarded, but they were not whole. They were a city of steel, not of light, and in their steel the shadow found its mirror. Let us stand now in the heart of Minas Ithil, where the white tree once bloomed. The courtyard is silent, the tree a skeletal relic, its branches clawing at the sky. The people pass by their heads, bowed their steps. Hurried, they do not look at the tree, for to look is to remember, and memory is a wound they cannot bear. The market is busy, but the voices are low, the laughter rare. The children no longer play. They train their small hands gripping wooden swords, their eyes learning to watch for enemies. The priests pray, but their words are rote, their altars cold. The city lives, but it does not breathe. In the great hall, the king let us name him Kali-Mehtar, a ruler of fire, and resolve sits upon his throne, his counsellors arrayed before him. He is a man of action, his voice sharp, his will unyielding. He knows the tales of his fathers, the fall of Minas Ithil, the war against Sauron, the choice that spared the One Ring. He vows to be different, to be stronger, to forge a city that cannot be broken. He speaks of unity of sacrifice, of the need to stand as one against the shadow. But his words are commands, not invitations, and commands do not stir the heart. Kali-Mehtar's reign is one of order, of discipline, of relentless preparation. He doubles the watch, he fortifies the passes, he demands loyalty from every man, woman, and child. He is not a tyrant, he loves his people in his way. But his love is a shield, not a flame. He protects, but he does not inspire. He guards, but he does not heal. And in his guarding, he begins to change the city, not into a bastion of hope, but into a fortress of fear. This is the 24th truth: to rule by strength is to rule by fear. Kali-Mehtar was a king, but he was not a leader. A leader lifts a leader, dreams, a leader kindles the light in others. Kali-Mehtar built, he fought, he endured, but he did not kindle. He made his people strong, but he did not make them whole, and in their strength they began to fracture. The shadow, ever watchful, saw this fracture. It did not need to strike, not yet. It needed only to tempt to offer what the city craved: certainty, power, the promise of invincibility. The shadow came not as a foe, but as a friend, whispering in the minds of the weary, the ambitious, the afraid. It spoke of strength, of survival, of the need to be more than human, to be unbreakable, and the people in their weariness began to listen. This temptation was not new. It was the same lure that had drawn Isildur to the One Ring, the same promise that had led Númenor to its doom. It was the temptation of strength, the belief that power could conquer fear, that might could banish doubt. In Minas Ithil, this temptation took root in the hearts of those who felt the city's fragility most keenly: the captains who stood upon the walls, the councillors who debated in the king's hall, the people who lived in the shadow of Mordor. One such man was Vardamir, a captain of the guard whose name is but a whisper in the annals of Gondor. He was no traitor, no servant of the dark. He was a man of honour, his heart sworn to the city, his life given to its defence. But Vardamir was also a man of fear. He had seen the lights in the east, the green flickers that danced beyond the mountains. He had heard the whispers in the night, the voices that spoke of hunger and ruin. He had felt the weight of the city's silence, the absence of songs, the fading of hope. And he began to believe that strength was not enough, not the strength of men at least. Vardamir sought answers, not in the old tales, but in the forbidden. He turned to the ancient texts, the scrolls hidden in the city's archives, written by sages who had studied the arts of the enemy. These were not spells of evil, but of power, of mastery, of bending the world to one's will. Vardamir read of rituals that could strengthen the body, of charms that could sharpen the mind, of secrets that could make a city unassailable. He did not seek to serve Sauron. He sought to save Minas Ithil. But the shadow does not need service. It needs only a crack in the heart, a moment of doubt, a step toward the forbidden. This is the 25th truth. The temptation of strength is the shadow's greatest lure. It does not promise evil, it promises salvation. It does not ask for betrayal, it asks for loyalty. Vardamir was loyal, but his loyalty was to a city of stone, not a city of light. He sought to protect, but he did not seek to love. And in his seeking he opened a door that could not be closed. Vardamir was not alone. Others in the city felt the same pull, the same hunger for certainty. The councillors whispered of alliances with distant powers, of seeking aid from those who knew the arts of the East. The priests, desperate to revive the White Tree, turned to older rites, ones not spoken of in the light. The people, weary of fear, began to dream of a strength that could not be challenged, a power that could silence the whispers from Mordor. They did not turn to evil, they turned to hope, but it was a false hope, a hope built on the promise of control, not of creation. Kalimetar the king saw these currents in his city, and he did not stop them. He was a man of war, of action, of results. He believed in strength, in discipline, in the need to be ready. When Vardamir came to him speaking of ancient arts that could bolster the city's defenses, Kalimetar listened. He did not embrace the forbidden, not yet, but he did not reject it. He saw in Vardamir's words a chance to secure the city, to prove that he was greater than his fathers, to banish the shadow forever. This is the 26th truth. The greatest danger is not the choice to do evil, but the choice to do nothing. Kalimetar was not a villain. He was a king caught between duty and doubt, between the past and the future. He did not act, but he did not prevent. He did not lead, but he did not follow. He stood, and in his standing he let the shadow move. The city began to change, not in great ways, but in small ones. The guards upon the walls carried new talismans etched with strange runes said to sharpen their sight. The priests burned herbs in their rituals, their smoke thick and bitter, said to ward off evil. The people whispered of secrets of powers that could make them strong, of a future where fear was no more. These were not the acts of a city fallen, but of a city falling step by subtle step, drawn by the promise of strength. Let us pause now in the shadow of Minas Ithil's towers and consider the nature of temptation. It is not a loud thing, not a demand or a threat. It is a whisper, a suggestion, a hand extended in the dark. In Minas Ithil, the temptation was not to serve the shadow, but to outwit it, to be stronger than it, to master it. The people did not seek to destroy their city, they sought to save it. But salvation built on power is no salvation at all. It is a chain binding the heart to the very thing it fears. The White Tree dead now stood as a silent witness to this change. The people no longer tended it. They no longer prayed beneath it. They turned instead to new symbols, to amulets and chants, to the promise of strength. The tree was a reminder of what had been, of a hope that had faded, and they could not bear to look upon it. So they turned away, and in their turning they lost another piece of themselves. This is the 27th truth. To forsake the past is to forsake the future. The White Tree was not just a plant, it was a link to Númenor, to the Valar, to the light that had built Minas Ithil. To abandon it was to abandon the city's soul, to trade its dreams for the illusion of power. The people of Minas Ithil were not evil, they were desperate. But desperation is a crack in the heart, and through that crack the shadow flows. In this time a new figure emerged, a man named Myrddin, a scholar of the old law. He was no warrior, no captain, but his words carried weight. His eyes burned with a fire that drew others to him. Myrddin had studied the texts that Vardamir had found, and he had gone further, delving into secrets that even the boldest feared to touch. He spoke of power, not as a weapon, but as a birthright, a gift that men could claim to rival the elves, to challenge the enemy, to reshape the world. Myrddin was not a servant of Sauron. He was a dreamer, a man who believed that Minas Ithil could be more than a fortress, more than a city of fear. He spoke to the people not in the king's hall, but in the shadows, in the homes of the weary, in the corners of the market. He told them of a future where they were not just survivors, but masters, where they could stand against Mordor and win not by enduring, but by overcoming. His words were like wine, sweet and heady, and the people drank deeply. They were tired of fear, tired of silence, tired of waiting. Myrddin offered them a vision, a purpose, a strength that could banish their doubts. They did not see the shadow in his words, for it was cloaked in hope, in pride, in the promise of victory. They saw only the light, but it was a false light, a flame that burned without warmth. Calimetar heard of Myrdane's teachings, and he summoned him to the hall. The king was wary, but he was also intrigued. He saw in Myrdane a spark, a chance to rally the city to make it strong beyond the dreams of his fathers. He questioned him, tested him, sought to know the source of his knowledge. Myrdane spoke carefully, his words veiled, but he offered the king a glimpse of power, a taste of what could be, and Calimetar in his hunger for certainty did not turn him away. This is the 28th truth: the shadow does not need to win, it needs only to be welcomed. Myrdane was not the enemy, but he was a door, and through that door the shadow slipped. His teachings spread not as a flood, but as a trickle, touching the hearts of the desperate, the ambitious, the afraid. The city did not fall, not yet, but it leaned its foundations, shifting its light, dimming. The years passed, and the city grew stranger. The guards carried blades etched with runes, their edges gleaming with an unnatural light. The priests chanted in tongues not heard since the days of Numenor's fall, their voices echoing through the streets. The people wore amulets, their eyes bright with a fervour that was not hope, but hunger. The king ruled, but his rule was distant, his heart divided between duty and the promise of power. The white tree was forgotten now, its courtyard empty, its branches crumbling to dust. The people did not mourn it, they did not need it. They had new symbols, new rites, new dreams. They were a city of strength, of certainty, of the belief that they could master the shadow. But strength is a lie when it is built on fear, and certainty is a trap when it is built on pride. This is the 29th truth: the shadow does not destroy, it distorts. It takes what is good love, hope, courage, and twists. It makes it a mirror of itself. The people of Minas Ithil were not evil. They were lost. They sought to save their city, but they saved only its stones, not its soul. They sought to be strong, but they became brittle, their hearts hardened by the very power they craved. Let us walk now to the edge of Minas Ithil, where the river Anduin flows its song, drowned by the chants of the priests. The fields of Ithilien are barren, the farmers gone, their homes empty. The moon rises, but its light is sickly green and cold, like the flickers seen beyond the mountains. The guards stand their armour heavy with runes, their eyes burning with a light that is not their own. They are strong, but they are not free. They are a city of power, but they are not a city of light. In the heart of the city, Calimetar sits his throne, a weight upon his soul. He is a king, but he is also a man, and men are frail, prone to the lure of certainty. He sees the changes in his city, the fervour in his people, the power in their hands. He does not stop them, for to stop them would be to admit doubt, and doubt is a crack in the armour of a king. And in the east, the shadow stirs. Sauron's spirit, growing stronger, feels the city's lean, its hunger, its pride. He does not need to act, not yet. He needs only to wait, to let the people of Minas Ithil weave their own doom. The lights in the east grow brighter, the whispers louder, the weight heavier. The city stands, but it is no longer Minas Ithil. It is something else, something new, something that carries the seed of Minas Morgul. As we leave this chapter of the tale, let us carry the weight of Calimetar's choice, the echo of Myrdane's words, the shadow of Vardamir's search. The city is not yet lost, but it is losing its light, fading, its heart turning. The shadow waits patient, as stone cunning as the night, and the people in their hunger for strength draw it closer. What is the strength we seek? What is the light we forsake? These are the questions that Minas Ithil asks not just of its people, but of us all. The city is a warning, a mirror, a song that fades but does not end. Let us walk on into the next chapter of this journey, where the shadow will take form, and where the soul of Minas Ithil will face its darkest hour. The tale of Minas Ithil winds deeper into the shadowed folds of time, where the city's light, once a beacon of hope, flickers like a candle in a storm. Its towers stand their stones still fair under the moon's gaze, but the heart of the city is ailing, its pulse weakened by years of silence, fear, and the seductive promise of power. The white tree is no more, its roots dust, its memory a wound. The people move through their days, their faces set, their hands clutching talismans that promise strength but deliver only chains. The question echoes relentless as the tide. How does a city of radiance become a citadel of fear? To answer, we must walk the paths of the Third Age, where the shadow cunning and patient tightens its grip, not with armies, but with the pride that blinds, the hubris that binds, and the choices that turn a city's soul to stone. This is no mere chronicle of decline, but a meditation on the frailty of the human spirit, the allure of dominion, and the cost of believing we can master the dark. Minas Ithil is a mirror, reflecting the temptations we face when hope fades, the lies we tell ourselves when fear reigns, and the truths we ignore at our peril. Let us tread softly, for the ground is treacherous and the lessons are as sharp as a blade forged in starlight. The years have carved deep lines into Minas Ithil, not in its walls but in its people. The city endures a fortress of iron and stone, its gates barred against the east, its towers bristling with spears. Mordor lies silent, its fires dim, its master a spirit without form. Yet the shadow is ever present, a weight that presses upon the soul. The men of Gondor, heirs of Numenor's glory, hold their watch, their eyes scanning the mountains of shadow, their hearts hardened by the certainty of threat. They are a people of vigilance, of discipline, of unyielding resolve, but they are also a people of pride, and pride is a flame that burns both ways. The kings who rule Minas Ithil are no longer the poets of old, nor the warriors who fought beside elves. They are rulers of a city on the edge, their crowns heavy with the weight of legacy and expectation. They speak of Gondor's might, of the need to be unbreakable, to stand as a bulwark against the dark. They forge new alliances, they hone their armies, they seek secrets that will make their city invincible. They are not evil, nor are they weak. They are proud, and pride is a chain that binds the heart before the mind knows it is caught. This is the 30th truth. Pride is the shadow's mirror. It reflects our strength, our will, our desire to be more. But it distorts, turning virtue to vice, courage to arrogance, hope to hubris. The men of Minas Ithil were proud, their city a testament to their endurance, their defiance a banner against the dark. But pride does not kindle. It consumes. It does not unite. It isolates. It does not lift. It weighs. And in their pride, the people of Minas Ithil began to falter. Let us stand now in the heart of Minas Ithil, where the white tree once stood. The courtyard is empty, its stones cracked, its air thick with the scent of bitter herbs burned in forgotten rites. The people move quickly, their eyes averted, as if the ground itself holds memories they cannot face. The market hums, but the voices are sharp, the bargains struck with suspicion. The children train in the shadow of the towers, their laughter replaced by the clash of wooden swords. The priests chant their voices low, their words laced with strange cadences that echo not of Gondor, but of older, darker places. The city lives, but it is a life of tension, of strain, of a people stretched to breaking. In the great hall, the king, let us call him Ithil, a name that speaks of fire and conquest, sits upon his throne, his gaze like steel, his hands gripping the arms of his seat. He is a man of vision, of ambition, of a will that bends others to his purpose. He knows the history of Minas Ithil, its beauty, its fall, its reclamation. He knows the shadow that waits beyond the mountains, the enemy that bides its time. He vows to be greater than his fathers, to forge a city that cannot be touched, to make Gondor a name that echoes through the ages. But his vision is not of light, but of power, and power is a flame that burns its wielder first. Ithil's reign is one of grandeur, of bold deeds, of a city that seeks to rise above its fears. He builds new forges, their fires burning day and night, crafting blades that gleam with an unnatural edge. He sends emissaries to distant lands, seeking knowledge, seeking allies, seeking anything that will make his city strong. He listens to men like Myrdan, the scholar, whose words promise mastery, whose secrets offer dominion. He does not bow to the shadow, but he does not see that the shadow does not need his bow. It needs only his pride, his hunger, his belief that he can outwit the dark. This is the 31st truth pride blinds where humility sees. Ithil was a king, but he was also a man and men are frail, prone to the lure of their own greatness. He saw his city's strength, its walls, its armies, and he believed they could stand against anything. He did not see the cracks in its heart, the silences in its halls, the fear that drove its people to seek power over love. He did not see because pride does not look inward. It looks only to the horizon, to the glory that might be. The shadow, ever patient, saw this blindness. It did not need to strike, not yet. It needed only to feed the city's pride, to stoke its hunger for invincibility. The shadow came as a whisper, not in the night, but in the day, in the words of counselors, in the dreams of captains, in the chants of priests. It spoke of strength, of certainty, of a future where fear was no more. It offered secrets not of evil, but of power of knowledge that could make men more than men, that could make Minas Ithil a rival to the valor themselves. And the people in their pride began to listen. This was no sudden fall, no moment of betrayal. It was a slow turning, a shift in the soul of the city. The guards upon the walls carried blades etched with runes, their edges sharp beyond the craft of Gondor. The priests burned offerings that left a sickly green haze, their rituals promising protection, but leaving a chill in the heart. The people wore amulets, their eyes bright with a fervour that was not hope, but ambition. They were not yet servants of the shadow, but they were its students, learning its lessons, walking its paths, believing they could master its power without paying its price. One such man was Turgon, a counsellor in Romendasil's court, whose mind was as sharp as a blade, whose heart burned with the desire to see Minas Ithil rise. Turgon was no villain. He was a patriot, a man who loved his city, who believed it could be more than a fortress, more than a shadow of its past. He studied the texts that Myrdan had unearthed, and he went further, seeking out the forbidden, the knowledge that had been sealed away since the fall of Númenor. He spoke to the King of Power not as a temptation, but as a necessity, a tool to secure the city's future. Turgon's words were like fire spreading through the court, igniting the ambitions of those who listened. He spoke of rituals that could strengthen the walls of charms, that could ward off the enemy, of secrets that could make the city's armies unstoppable. He did not speak of Sauron, nor of the shadow. He spoke of Gondor, of glory, of a legacy that would never fade. And Romendasil, in his pride, did not silence him. He listened, he questioned, he allowed Turgon to continue believing that such knowledge could be controlled, that it could serve the city without consuming it. This is the 32nd truth: the shadow does not need to rule, it needs only to be invited. Turgon was not a servant of Sauron, but he was a bridge, a path by which the shadow entered. His words, his secrets, his ambition. They were the cracks through which the dark flowed, not as a flood, but as a mist, subtle and pervasive, clouding the heart before the mind could see. The city began to change, not in its stones, but in its spirit. The forges burned hotter, their smoke thick with a scent that was not of iron, but of something older, stranger. The guards stood taller, their armour gleaming with runes that seemed to pulse in the dark. The priests chanted louder, their voices carrying through the streets, their words no longer of the valour, but of power, of dominion, of a strength that could defy the gods. The people moved with purpose, their eyes alight, but it was a cold light, a light that did not warm, but consumed. In the homes of Minas Ithil, the old ways faded. The tales of Eärendil, of Beren and Lúthien, of the light that endures, these were no longer told. In their place were stories of conquest, of heroes who wielded power, of a city that could stand alone against the world. The children did not play. They prepared their minds filled with dreams of glory, their hearts hardened by the need to be strong. The elders did not speak. They watched, their silence a surrender to the tide that swept the city away. This is the 33rd truth. A city that forgets its stories, forgets itself. Minas Ithil was built on dreams, on songs, on the hope of a world made whole. But dreams are fragile, and songs are fleeting, and hope requires courage to hold. The people of Minas Ithil chose strength over hope, power over dreams, pride over love. They did not fall, not yet, but they leaned, their souls tilting toward the dark. Let us pause now in the flickering light of Minas Ithil's towers and consider the nature of pride. It is not a sin, not in itself. It is a spark, a fire that can lift us, drive us, make us more than we are. But fire untended becomes a blaze, and pride unchecked becomes a chain. In Minas Ithil, pride was the city's strength, its defiance, its refusal to bow. But it was also its weakness, its blindness, its belief that it could master the shadow without paying its price. The king Romendasil felt this pride most keenly. He was a man of vision, but his vision was of a city that stood alone, a city that needed no allies, no gods, no dreams. He saw the changes in his people, the fervor in their eyes, the power in their hands. He did not stop them, for to stop them would be to admit weakness, and weakness was a crack in the armor of a king. He believed he could control the tide, that he could wield the secrets Turgon offered, without losing himself, without losing the city. But control is an illusion, and power is a liar. The rituals, the runes, the chants, they were not tools but chains binding the city to the very shadow it sought to defy. The people did not see this, for pride blinds the heart before the eyes. They saw only their strength, their certainty, their destiny. They did not see the shadow that walked among them, cloaked in their own ambitions, smiling at their folly. This is the 34th truth: the shadow does not need to fight. It needs only to be fed. The people of Minas Ithil fed the shadow not with worship, but with pride, with ambition, with the belief that they could be more than they were. They sought to rise, but they fell not to the ground, but into themselves, into the prison of their own desires. In this time a voice rose faint but clear, an echo of the light that had once defined the city. Her name was Anariel, a woman of no great name, a weaver whose hands wove not just cloth, but stories, songs, memories. She was no leader, no scholar, but her heart was a flame, small but unyielding, that burned with the love of Minas Ithil's past. She walked the streets, her voice soft, singing the old songs, telling the old tales, reminding the people of who they had been. Anariel did not speak of power, nor of strength. She spoke of the white tree, of the moonlight on the river, of the dreams that had built the city. She spoke of love, of hope, of the courage to be frail, to be human, to trust in something greater than oneself. Her words were like water, gentle but persistent, wearing away the stone of pride that encased the city's heart. For a moment her voice stirred the people. The children listened, their eyes wide, their hearts remembering what they had never known. The elders wept their silence, broken by the memory of songs. The guards paused, their hands loosening on their swords, their minds turning to the stars. Anariel was no savior, but she was a reminder, a spark of the light that had once been Minas Ithil's soul. But sparks are fragile, and pride is a wind that snuffs them out. Romendasil heard of Anariel's songs, and he grew angry. He was a king of power, of order, of a city that must be strong. He saw in her words not hope but weakness, not light but distraction. He summoned her to his hall, and there in the shadow of his throne he spoke. "Your songs are fair," he said, "but they are not for this time. We need strength, not dreams. We need power, not tales. Be silent or be gone." Anariel stood, her eyes steady, her voice calm. "My king," she said, "a city without dreams is no city at all. A people without hope are already lost. I sing not to weaken, but to save. I sing to remind us of the light." Her words were a challenge, not to the king's power, but to his pride, and pride does not yield. Romendasil banished her not to death, but to the wilds of Ithilien, where her voice would not reach the city's ears. The people heard of Anariel's fate, and they did not protest. They loved her songs, but they loved their strength more. They needed her hope, but they needed their certainty more. And so they turned away, their silence a betrayal not of Anariel, but of themselves. Her songs faded, her stories drifted into the wind, and the city grew darker still. This is the 35th truth: the light asks for courage, but pride offers ease. Anariel was a chance, a moment to turn, to remember, to choose the heart over the sword. But the people of Minas Ithil chose pride not because they were evil, but because they were afraid, and pride is a shield that feels stronger than hope. The years passed, and the city grew stranger still. The forges burned with a light that was not of fire, their smoke curling like fingers into the sky. The guards moved with a precision that was not human, their eyes glowing with a cold, unnatural light. The priests chanted their voices, a chorus of hunger, their rituals drawing shadows that lingered too long. The people lived, but their lives were not their own. They were a city of pride, of power, of a belief that they could defy the dark by becoming like it. Ithil ruled, but his rule was a shadow of itself. He was a king, but he was also a prisoner bound by the secrets he had allowed, the power he had sought, the pride he had fed. He saw the changes in his city, the fervor in his people, the darkness in their eyes. He did not stop them, for to stop them would be to admit failure, and failure was a crack in the armor of a king. And in the east the shadow grew. Sauron's spirit, now stronger, felt the city's pride, its hunger, its blindness. He did not need to act, not yet. He needed only to wait to let the people of Minas Ithil forge their own chains. The lights in the east burned brighter green and cold like eyes in the dark. The whispers grew louder, speaking not of fear, but of power, of destiny, of a city that could rule the world. This is the 36th truth: the shadow does not need to conquer. It needs only to be chosen. The people of Minas Ithil chose the shadow not as an enemy, but as a guide, a teacher, a promise of strength. They did not see the chains, for they were cloaked in glory. They did not see the dark, for it was lit by their own pride. Let us walk now to the edge of Minas Ithil, where the river Anduin flows, its waters clouded, its song silenced. The fields of Ithilien are empty, the stars hidden by a haze that is not of the earth. The moon rises, but its light is sickly twisted by the chants that echo from the city. The guards stand, their armor pulsing with runes, their hearts pulsing with pride. They are strong, but they are not free. They are a city of power, but they are not a city of light. In the heart of the city, Ithil sits his throne, a cage, his crown, a chain. He is a king, but he is also a man, and men are frail, prone to the lure of their own greatness. He sees the city's path, but he does not turn from it, for to turn would be to admit he was wrong, and pride does not bend. And in the east, the shadow smiles. The city is not yet Minas Morgul, but it is no longer Minas Ithil. It is something else, something new, something that carries the seed of its own doom. The people are not yet lost, but they are losing their hearts, bound by the chains of pride, their souls leaning toward the dark. As we leave this chapter of the tale, let us carry the echo of Anariel's song, the weight of Ithil's pride, the shadow of Turgon's ambition. The city stands, but it is crumbling, its light fading, its heart turning to stone. The shadow waits patient as death, cunning as the night, and the people in their pride draw it closer. What is the pride we hold? What is the light we forsake? These are the questions that Minas Ithil asks, not just of its people, but of us all. The city is a mirror, a warning, a song that fades but does not end. Let us walk on into the next chapter of this journey, where the shadow will take form and where the soul of Minas Ithil will face its final reckoning. The tale of Minas Ithil weaves onward, a thread of fading starlight caught in the coils of an encroaching night. The city stands, its towers still thrusting defiantly into the sky, their stones pale as bone under a moon that seems to shrink from their gaze. Yet within these walls the soul of the city withers its heartbeat, a faint echo drowned by chants that are no longer prayers, by a fervor that is no longer hope. The white tree is gone, its memory erased, its courtyard a barren scar. The people move with purpose, but it is a purpose twisted, their eyes alight with a hunger that consumes rather than creates. The question persists, heavy as a curse. How does a city of moonlight become a citadel of fear? To answer, we must venture deeper into the Third Age, where the shadow, patient as stone, cunning as a serpent, draws the city into its embrace, not with force, but with the hunger for dominion, the lust for mastery, and the choices that bind the heart to the dark. This is no mere story of a city's fall, but a meditation on the desires that drive us, the illusions that blind us, and the truths we forsake when we seek to rule rather than to serve. Minas Ithil is a mirror reflecting the cost of craving control, the peril of believing we can bend the world to our will, and the slow corrosion of a soul that chooses power over love. Let us tread this path with care, for the ground is brittle and the lessons are as piercing as a cry in the silence. The years have hollowed Minas Ithil, not its walls, but its essence. The city endures, a fortress of unyielding stone, its gates sealed, its towers bristling with blades that gleam with an unnatural sheen. Mordor lies quiet, its fires mere embers, its master a spirit gathering strength in the shadows. Yet the silence is a deception, a veil over a presence that grows heavier with each passing day. The men of Gondor, once bearers of Numenor's light, stand their watch, their hands gripping weapons etched with runes, their minds fixed on the east. They are a people of resolve, of discipline, of a will that refuses to bend. But they are also a people consumed by hunger, a hunger not for bread or peace, but for dominion, for the power to shape the world, to banish fear forever. The kings who rule Minas Ithil are no longer the dreamers who sang beneath the white tree, nor the warriors who stood with elves against Sauron. They are lords of ambition, their crowns symbols not of stewardship, but of mastery. They speak of Gondor's destiny, of a city that will not merely endure, but triumph. A city that will cast its shadow over all lands. They seek secrets, forge alliances, delve into arts forbidden by their fathers. They are not servants of the dark, not yet. They are masters of their own fate, or so they believe, and in that belief they forge their own chains. This is the 37th truth. The hunger for dominion is the shadow's feast. It does not demand submission, it offers supremacy. It does not break the will, it feeds it, turning desire to obsession, vision to blindness, strength to servitude. The men of Minas Ithil were hungry, their city a monument to their will, their defiance a fire that burned bright. But fire untended becomes a blaze, and hunger unchecked becomes a void. In their hunger, the people of Minas Ithil began to lose themselves. Let us stand now in the heart of Minas Ithil, where the white tree's courtyard lies desolate, its stones stained with the ash of forgotten offerings. The air is thick, heavy with the scent of incense that is not of Gondor, its smoke curling like a living thing. The people move swiftly, their faces sharp, their eyes burning with a light that is not of hope, but of want. The market is a clamour of voices, but the words are of trade, of power, of secrets bartered in whispers. The children do not play. They march, their steps precise, their minds filled with dreams of conquest. The priests chant their voices, a tide that drowns the silence, their words no longer of the valour, but of forces older, hungrier, that promise strength at a price none dare name. The city breathes, but it is a breath of fire consuming all it touches. In the great hall the king, let us name him Tarandor, a ruler of iron, and flame sits upon his throne, his presence a storm held in check. He is a man of will, his voice a command that shapes the world, his ambition a force that bends all to his purpose. He knows the tales of Minas Ithil, its founding, its fall, its reclamation. He knows the shadow that waits beyond the Efelduath, the enemy that never dies. He vows to be more than his fathers, to forge a city that does not merely stand, but rules a city that will make the world kneel. But his vow is not of service, but of dominion, and dominion is a path that leads only to the dark. Tarandor's reign is one of glory, of deeds that echo beyond the valley of Ithilien. He builds new towers, their spires piercing the sky, their stones etched with runes that pulse in the dark. He sends armies to the borders, their banners flying, their blades sharp with secrets that make them more than men. He listens to men like Turgon, whose counsel speaks of power, and to others who have followed, scholars and seers who delve deeper into the forbidden-seeking arts that will make Minas Ithil a god among cities. He does not worship the shadow, but he courts it, believing he can wield its gifts without paying its price. This is the 38th truth. Dominion is a lie that blinds the liar first. Tarandor was a king, but he was also a man, and men are frail, prone to the illusion of control. He saw his city's might, its armies, its secrets, and he believed they could conquer anything. He did not see the cost, the hunger that grew in his people, the darkness that seeped into their souls. He did not see because dominion does not look to the heart. It looks only to the throne, to the power that might be. The shadow, ever watchful, saw this hunger. It did not need to strike, not yet. It needed only to feed, to offer what the city craved: mastery, certainty, the promise of a world bent to its will. The shadow came as a voice, not in dreams, but in waking, in the words of seers, in the chants of priests, in the ambitions of captains. It spoke of power, of a future where Minas Ithil would not merely survive, but reign, where fear would be a memory and all would bow before its light. It offered secrets not of destruction, but of creation, of a strength that could reshape the earth. And the people in their hunger began to feast. This was no sudden plunge, no moment of surrender. It was a slow descent, a turning of the soul. The guards upon the walls bore armor that seemed to move with them, its runes alive with a will of their own. The priests performed rites that left the air heavy, the ground trembling as if the earth itself answered their call. The people carried talismans that burned against their skin, their minds filled with visions of glory, of a city that would never fall. They were not yet the shadow's thralls, but they were its apprentices, learning its craft, walking its ways, believing they could master its power without losing their own. One such man was Barahir, a seer who rose in Tarandor's court, his eyes like embers, his voice a song that drew all who heard it. Barahir was no traitor. He was a visionary, a man who believed Minas Ithil could transcend its mortal limits, could become a beacon not just for Gondor, but for all Middle-earth. He delved into the forbidden texts, deeper than Turgon, deeper than Myrdain, seeking truths that had been hidden since the world was young. He spoke to the King of Power not as a tool, but as a destiny, a right that Minas Ithil could claim to rival the powers of the East. Barahir's words were like a tide sweeping through the court, drowning doubt in a flood of possibility. He spoke of rituals that could bind the elements, of charms that could bend time, of secrets that could make the city eternal. He did not speak of Sauron nor of the shadow. He spoke of Minas Ithil, of its greatness, of a legacy that would outlast the stars. And Tarandor, in his hunger, did not turn him away. He listened, he questioned, he allowed Barahir to weave his visions, believing that such power could be harnessed, that it could serve the city without consuming it. This is the 39th truth. The shadow does not need to enslave, it needs only to entice. Barahir was not a servant of Sauron, but he was a gate, a path by which the shadow entered. His visions, his secrets, his hunger, they were the sparks that lit the fire, not a blaze but a smoulder, creeping through the heart of the city, turning its light to ash. The city began to change, not in its form, but in its essence. The forges burned with a light that was not of this world, their flames casting shadows that lingered too long. The guards moved with a grace that was not human, their eyes seeing beyond the veil of night, their hearts beating with a rhythm that was not their own. The priests chanted their voices, a chorus that shook the stones, their rites calling forth powers that answered with a hunger of their own. The people lived, but their lives were a fever, their minds consumed by dreams of dominion, their souls bound by the power they sought. In the homes of Minas Ithil, the old ways were no more. The songs of Númenor, of the sea of the light that endures, these were forgotten, replaced by chants of power, of victory, of a city that would rule the earth. The children did not dream. They planned, their minds filled with visions of conquest, their hearts hardened by the need to be more. The elders did not speak. They bowed their silence, a surrender to the tide that swept the city away. This is the 40th truth. A city that seeks dominion loses its soul. Minas Ithil was built on hope, on love, on the dream of a world made whole. But hope is fragile, and love is frail, and dreams require faith to hold. The people of Minas Ithil chose power over faith, dominion over love, hunger over hope. They did not fall, not yet, but they sank, their souls drowning in the tide of their own ambition. Let us pause now in the shadowed light of Minas Ithil's towers and consider the nature of dominion. It is not a crown, not a throne, not a sword. It is a hunger, a need to control, to shape, to make the world kneel. In Minas Ithil, dominion was the city's dream, its promise, its reason to endure. But dreams of dominion are dreams of the shadow, for they seek not to create, but to possess, not to lift, but to bind. The people of Minas Ithil were not evil. They were hungry, and hunger blinds the heart before the eyes. The king Tarandor felt this hunger most keenly. He was a man of will, but his will was a fire that consumed all it touched. He saw the changes in his city, the power in his people, the glory in their eyes. He did not stop them, for to stop them would be to admit doubt, and doubt was a crack in the armor of a king. He believed he could master the power, that he could wield the secrets Barahir offered without losing himself, without losing the city. But mastery is a lie, and power is a thief. The rituals, the runes, the chants, they were not gifts but shackles binding the city to the shadow it sought to overcome. The people did not see this for hunger. Clouds the mind before the soul. They saw only their destiny, their strength, their right to rule. They did not see the shadow that walked among them, cloaked in their own ambition, laughing at their blindness. This is the 41st truth: the shadow does not need to bind. It needs only to be desired. The people of Minas Ithil desired the shadow not as a master, but as a means, a path to the dominion they craved. They did not see the chains, for they were forged in their own hearts. They did not see the dark, for it was lit by their own hunger. In this time a voice rose, faint as a whisper, a remnant of the light that had once defined the city. His name was Elendir, a scribe, a keeper of the old law, whose hands trembled as he wrote, whose heart burned with the memory of Minas Ithil's soul. He was no warrior, no seer, but his words were a flame, small but steady, that flickered in the gathering dark. He walked the streets, his voice soft, speaking of the old ways of the white tree of the light that had built the city. Elendir did not speak of power nor of dominion. He spoke of love, of hope, of the courage to be small, to be human, to trust in something greater than oneself. He told the tales of Eärendil, of Beren and Luthien, of the Valar who watched from afar. His words were like rain, gentle but persistent, seeking to soften the stone of ambition that encased the city's heart. For a moment his voice reached the people. The children paused, their eyes curious, their hearts stirring with something they could not name. The elders listened, their faces softening their silence, broken by the echo of forgotten songs. The guards hesitated, their hands loosening on their blades, their minds turning to the stars. Elendir was no savior, but he was a memory, a spark of the light that had once been Minas Ithil's soul. But sparks are frail, and hunger is a wind that snuffs them out. Tarandor heard of Elendir's words, and he grew wroth. He was a king of dominion, of power, of a city that must be eternal. He saw in Elendir's tales not hope, but weakness, not light, but folly. He summoned him to his hall, and there in the shadow of his throne he spoke. "Your tales are fair," he said, "but they are not for this age. We need power, not memories. We need strength, not songs. Be silent or be gone." Elendir stood, his eyes steady, his voice calm. "My king," he said, "a city without memory is no city at all. A people without hope are already lost. I speak not to weaken, but to save. I speak to remind us of the light." His words were a plea not for himself, but for the city, a challenge to the hunger that consumed it. But hunger does not listen, and Tarandor in his wrath banished Elendir not to death, but to the wilds where his voice would not trouble the city's dreams. The people heard of Elendir's fate, and they did not speak. They loved his tales, but they loved their power more. They needed his hope, but they needed their dominion more. And so they turned away, their silence, a betrayal not of Elendir, but of themselves. His words faded, his tales drifted into the night, and the city grew darker still. This is the 42nd truth: the light asks for faith, but hunger offers certainty. Elendir was a chance, a moment to turn, to remember, to choose the soul over the throne. But the people of Minas Ithil chose hunger, not because they were evil, but because they were afraid, and hunger is a promise that feels stronger than faith. The years passed, and the city grew stranger still. The forges burned with a light that was not of fire, their smoke twisting into shapes that seemed to watch. The guards moved with a will that was not their own, their eyes glowing with a light that was not of life. The priests chanted their voices, a storm that shook the earth, their rites calling forth powers that answered with a hunger greater than their own. The people lived, but their lives were a dream, their minds lost in visions of dominion, their souls bound by the power they had embraced.
Tarandor ruled, but his rule was a shadow of itself. He was a king, but he was also a prisoner bound by the secrets he had welcomed, the power he had sought, the hunger he had fed. He saw the changes in his city, the darkness in his people, the fire in their eyes. He did not stop them, for to stop them would be to admit failure, and failure was a crack in the armor of a king.
And in the east the shadow stirred.
Sauron's spirit, now strong, felt the city's hunger, its ambition, its blindness. He did not need to act, not yet. He needed only to wait, to let the people of Minas Ithil forge their own doom. The lights in the east burned brighter green and cold, like stars fallen to malice. The whispers grew louder, speaking not of fear, but of power, of destiny, of a city that could rule the world.
This is the 43rd truth: the shadow does not need to conquer, it needs only to be craved. The people of Minas Ithil craved the shadow not as a lord, but as a promise, a path to the dominion they sought. They did not see the chains, for they were forged in their own desires. They did not see the dark, for it was lit by their own hunger. Let us walk now to the edge of Minas Ithil, where the river Anduin flows its waters black, its song silenced by the chants that echo from the city. The fields of Ithilien are barren, the stars hidden by a haze that is not of the earth. The moon rises, but its light is twisted green and cold, a mockery of the light that once defined the city. The guards stand, their armor alive with runes, their hearts alive with hunger. They are strong, but they are not free. They are a city of power, but they are not a city of light.
In the heart of the city, Tarandor sits his throne, a pyre, his crown, a chain. He is a king, but he is also a man, and men are frail, prone to the lure of their own desires. He sees the city's path, but he does not turn from it, for to turn would be to admit he was wrong, and hunger does not yield. And in the east, the shadow smiles. The city is not yet Minas Morgul, but it is no longer Minas Ithil. It is something else, something new, something that carries the seed of its own destruction. The people are not yet lost, but they are losing their hearts, bound by the chains of hunger, their souls drowning in the tide of their own ambition. As we leave this chapter of the tale, let us carry the echo of Elendil's words, the weight of Tarandor's hunger, the shadow of Barahir's visions. The city stands, but it is crumbling, its light extinguished, its heart consumed. The shadow waits patient, as death cunning as the night, and the people in their hunger draw it closer. What is the hunger we feed? What is the light we forsake? These are the questions that Minas Ithil asks not just of its people but of us all. The city is a mirror, a warning, a song that fades but does not end. Let us walk on into the next chapter of this journey, where the shadow will take form and where the soul of Minas Ithil will face its final reckoning. The tale of Minas Ithil spirals deeper into the twilight, where the city's once radiant heart beats faintly, smothered by a darkness that wears the guise of light. Its towers loom their stones, now cold and strange, reflecting a moon whose silver is tainted by a sickly green hue. The white tree is a forgotten wound, its courtyard a desecrated hollow where no footsteps linger. The people move as if driven, their eyes aglow with a fervor that is not hope but obsession, their hands clutching relics that promise salvation but deliver only servitude. The question endures, ancient and unyielding: how does a city of moonlight become a citadel of fear? To answer, we must tread the shadowed paths of the Third Age,
where the shadow, subtle as a dream, cloaks itself in radiance, not with swords, but with the illusion of glory, the deceit of false light, and the choices that blind the soul to its own ruin. This is no mere chronicle of a city's fall, but a reflection on the lies we embrace, the truths we deny, and the moment when we mistake the shadow for the dawn. Minas Ithil is a mirror revealing the peril of trusting in false promises, the cost of seeking light in the wrong places, and the slow betrayal of a heart that chooses illusion over reality. Let us walk this path with trembling steps, for the ground is false, and the truths are as sharp as a shard of starlight. The years have twisted Minas Ithil not in its form but in its essence. The city stands a fortress of stone, and will its gates sealed its towers, pulsing with a light that is not of the sun or moon, but of something older, hungrier. Mordor remains silent, its fires low, its master a spirit weaving strength in the east. Yet the shadow is no longer distant. It is here within the city, woven into its rites, its dreams, its very breath. The men of Gondor, once bearers of Númenor's hope, stand their watch, their armor alive with runes that whisper of power, their minds consumed by visions of a city that will not merely endure, but reign. They are a people of purpose, of certainty, of a fire that burns too bright, and in that brightness they are blind. The kings who rule Minas Ithil are no longer the stewards of a sacred trust, nor the warriors who fought for light. They are lords of illusion, their crowns aglow with a radiance that dazzles but does not warm. They speak of Gondor's ascendance, of a city that will cast its light across the world, a beacon to rival the stars. They delve into secrets, embrace rites, seek powers that promise eternity. They are not yet thralls of the shadow, but they are its pupils, learning its ways, believing they can wield its light without being burned. This is the 44th truth. The shadow's greatest deceit is the promise of light. It does not come as darkness, for darkness is feared. It comes as radiance, as glory, as the answer to every longing. The men of Minas Ithil were not seduced by evil. They were seduced by beauty, by a light that seemed to banish fear, by a promise that seemed to fulfill their dreams. But beauty can lie and light can blind, and in their blindness the people of Minas Ithil began to fall. Let us stand now in the heart of Minas Ithil, where the courtyard of the White Tree lies barren, its stones slick with the residue of rites that are no longer sacred. The air hums heavy with a power that is not of the earth, its currents twisting like threads of a web. The people move with fervor, their faces sharp, their eyes glowing with a light that is not their own. The market is a frenzy, but the voices are not of trade, but of prophecy, of visions bartered in hushed tones. The children do not march. They chant, their voices echoing the priests, their minds filled with dreams of a city that will rule the ages. The priests themselves are no longer servants of the valor. They are heralds of a new order. Their chants are summons to powers that answer with a hunger that shakes the soul. The city lives, but it is a life of fever, a blaze that consumes all it touches. In the great hall, the king, let us name him Narmashil, a ruler of vision, and fire sits upon his throne, his presence a beacon that draws all eyes. He is a man of charisma, his voice a song that bends hearts, his will a force that shapes reality. He knows the history of Minas Ithil, its radiance, its wounds, its defiance. He knows the shadow that waits beyond the mountains, the enemy that bides its time. He vows to transcend his fathers, to forge a city that is not merely a fortress, but a god, a light that will burn away the dark forever. But his vow is not of hope, but of glory, and glory is a light that blinds before it burns. Narmashil's reign is one of splendor, of acts that dazzle the eye and stir the soul. He builds new spires, their peaks crowned with orbs that glow with a green fire, casting an eerie light across the valley. He gathers seers and sages, men like Barahir, and those who have followed, who weave rituals that make the air sing, who craft relics that pulse with a life of their own. He speaks to his people not of duty, but of destiny, of a city that will be eternal, a name that will never fade. He does not kneel to the shadow, but he embraces its gifts, believing he can wield its light without paying its price. This is the 45th truth. The light of illusion is brighter than the light of truth. Narmashil was a king, but he was also a man, and men are frail, prone to the allure of what shines. He saw his city's radiance, its power, its promise, and he believed it was the dawn. He did not see the cost, the hunger that consumed his people, the darkness that grew in their hearts. He did not see because illusion does not reveal. It conceals, cloaking the truth in a veil of false light. The shadow, ever cunning, saw this blindness. It did not need to strike, not yet. It needed only to shine to offer the light. The city craved a light of certainty, of power, of a future without fear. The shadow came as a vision, not in the dark, but in the day, in the orbs that crowned the towers, in the relics that burned in the hands of the faithful, in the chants that filled the air with promise. It spoke of glory, of a city that would be a star, of a people who would be gods. It offered power not to destroy, but to create, to make Minas Ithil a name that would echo through time. And the people in their blindness began to worship. This was no sudden fall, no moment of surrender. It was a slow drift, a turning of the soul toward a light that was not light. The guards upon the walls bore armor that seemed to breathe its runes alive with a will that was not theirs. The priests performed rites that shook the earth, their voices calling forth powers that answered with a cold, unyielding hunger. The people carried relics that burned against their skin, their minds filled with visions of a city that would never fall, a world that would bow before them. They were not yet the shadow's slaves, but they were its devotees, following its light, believing it was their own. One such man was Vorondil, a priest who rose in Narmashil's court, his voice like thunder, his eyes like stars fallen to earth. Vorondil was no traitor. He was a believer, a man who saw in Minas Ithil a divine purpose, a city chosen to reshape the world. He delved into the rites that Barahir had begun, and he went further, crafting ceremonies that made the air shimmer, that made the stones of the city sing with a voice that was not of Gondor. He spoke to the King of Light, not as a gift, but as a right, a power that Minas Ithil could claim to rival the Valar themselves. Vorondil's rites were like a flame spreading through the city, igniting the hearts of those who heard. He spoke of a new age, of a city that would be eternal, of a people who would be more than mortal. He did not speak of Sauron, nor of the shadow. He spoke of Minas Ithil, of its radiance, of a destiny that would outshine the stars. And Narmashil, in his blindness, did not silence him. He listened, he watched. He allowed Vorondil to weave his rites, believing that such light could be controlled, that it could serve the city without consuming it. This is the 46th truth. The shadow does not need to deceive. It needs only to dazzle. Vorondil was not a servant of Sauron, but he was a lens, a prism through which the shadow's light shone. His rites, his visions, his fervor, they were the threads that wove the veil, not a shroud, but a glow, wrapping the city in a false dawn that hid the dark beneath. The city began to change, not in its stones, but in its spirit. The towers glowed with a light that was not of the moon, their orbs casting a green haze that twisted the stars. The forges burned with a fire that was not of the earth, their smoke forming shapes that seemed to watch, to wait. The guards moved with a purpose that was not human, their eyes seeing beyond the veil of the world, their hearts beating with a rhythm that was not their own. The priests chanted their voices, a storm that shook the heavens, their rites calling forth powers that answered with a hunger that could not be sated. The people lived, but their lives were a vision, their minds lost in a light that was not light, their souls bound by the radiance they adored. In the homes of Minas Ithil, the old ways were dust. The tales of Númenor, of the sea of the light that endures these, were no longer whispered. In their place were hymns of glory, of a city that would be a god, of a people who would be eternal. The children did not dream. They worshipped, their minds filled with visions of power, their hearts hardened by the need to be more. The elders did not speak. They knelt their silence, a surrender to the light that swept the city away. This is the 47th truth: a city that worships false light forgets its soul. Minas Ithil was built on hope, on love, on the dream of a world made whole. But hope is frail, and love is fleeting, and dreams require courage to hold. The people of Minas Ithil chose glory over courage, radiance over love, illusion over hope. They did not fall, not yet, but they drifted, their souls caught in the glow of a false dawn. Let us pause now in the eerie light of Minas Ithil's towers and consider the nature of false light. It is not darkness, for darkness is honest in its emptiness. It is a radiance that promises all but gives nothing, a glow that warms the eye but chills the heart. In Minas Ithil, false light was the city's dream, its promise, its reason to endure. But dreams of false light are dreams of the shadow, for they seek not to illuminate, but to blind, not to reveal, but to conceal. The people of Minas Ithil were not evil. They were dazzled, and dazzlement blinds the soul before the mind. The king Narmashil felt this dazzlement most keenly. He was a man of vision, but his vision was a mirage, a city that shone with a light that was not its own. He saw the changes in his people, the fire in their eyes, the power in their hands. He did not stop them, for to stop them would be to admit error, and error was a crack in the armor of a king. He believed he could wield the light, that he could shape the visions Vorondil offered without losing himself, without losing the city. But light cannot be wielded and visions cannot be shaped. The rites, the orbs, the chants, they were not tools but traps binding the city to the shadow it sought to outshine. The people did not see this, for false light blinds the heart before the eyes. They saw only their destiny, their radiance, their right to shine. They did not see the shadow that walked among them, cloaked in their own glory, smiling at their folly. This is the 48th truth: the shadow does not need to hide, it needs only to shine. The people of Minas Ithil embraced the shadow not as a foe, but as a saviour, a source of the light they craved. They did not see the veil, for it was woven of their own desires. They did not see the dark, for it was lit by their own blindness. In this time a voice rose, faint as a breath, a remnant of the true light that had once defined the city. Her name was Serinde, a healer, a woman whose hands mended not just bodies but spirits, whose heart burned with the memory of Minas Ithil's soul. She was no leader, no prophet, but her words were a flame, small but unyielding, that flickered in the false dawn. She walked the streets, her voice soft, speaking of the old ways, of the white tree of the light that came not from power but from love. Serinde did not speak of glory nor of destiny. She spoke of hope, of trust, of the courage to be frail, to be human, to seek the light that does not burn. She told the tales of Eärendil, of the Silmaril, that shone for all of the Valar who watched from afar. Her words were like a breeze, gentle but persistent, seeking to lift the veil that cloaked the city's heart. For a moment, her voice stirred the people. The children listened, their eyes softening their hearts, remembering something they had never known. The elders wept, their silence broken by the memory of true light. The guards paused, their hands loosening on their relics, their minds turning to the stars. Serinde was no saviour, but she was a reminder, a spark of the light that had once been Minas Ithil's soul. But sparks are fragile, and false light is a wind that snuffs them out. Narmashil heard of Serinde's words, and he grew wroth. He was a king of glory, of power, of a city that must be eternal. He saw in her tales not hope, but weakness, not light, but folly. He summoned her to his hall, and there in the glow of his throne he spoke. "Your tales are fair," he said, "but they are not for this time. We need light, not memories. We need power, not songs. Be silent or be gone." Serinde stood, her eyes steady, her voice calm. "My king," she said, "a city without true light is no city at all. A people without hope are already lost. I speak not to weaken, but to save. I speak to remind us of the light that endures." Her words were a plea not for herself, but for the city, a challenge to the illusion that consumed it. But illusion does not yield, and Narmashil in his wrath banished Serinde not to death, but to the wilds where her voice would not dim the city's glow. The people heard of Serinde's fate, and they did not speak. They loved her tales, but they loved their light more. They needed her hope, but they needed their glory more. And so they turned away their silence, a betrayal, not of Serinde, but of themselves. Her words faded, her tales drifted into the night, and the city grew brighter, but it was a brightness that chilled the soul. This is the 49th truth. The true light asks for courage, but false light offers ease. Serinde was a chance, a moment to turn, to see, to choose the truth over the lie. But the people of Minas Ithil chose the lie, not because they were evil, but because they were afraid, and false light is a promise that feels stronger than courage. The years passed, and the city grew stranger still. The towers burned with a light that was not of the stars, their orbs casting a glow that twisted the world. The forges roared with a fire that was not of the earth, their smoke forming shapes that seemed to speak, to command. The guards moved with a will that was not their own, their eyes glowing with a light that was not of life. The priests chanted their voices, a tide that drowned the heavens, their rites calling forth powers that answered with a hunger that consumed all. The people lived, but their lives were a dream, their minds lost in a light that was not light, their souls bound by the radiance they worshipped. Narmacil ruled, but his rule was a shadow of itself. He was a king, but he was also a prisoner, bound by the light he had embraced, the power he had sought, the glory he had fed. He saw the changes in his city, the fire in his people, the darkness beneath their glow. He did not stop them, for to stop them would be to admit failure, and failure was a crack in the armor of a king. And in the east the shadow stirred. Sauron's spirit, now mighty, felt the city's blindness, its worship, its surrender to the false light. He did not need to act, not yet. He needed only to wait, to let the people of Minas Ithil weave their own doom. The lights in the east burned brighter, green and cold, like eyes that saw all. The whispers grew louder, speaking not of fear, but of glory, of destiny, of a city that would be a god. This is the 50th truth. The shadow does not need to conquer. It needs only to be worshipped. The people of Minas Ithil worshipped the shadow not as a lord, but as a light, a promise of the glory they craved. They did not see the veil, for it was woven of their own desires. They did not see the dark, for it was lit by their own blindness. Let us walk now to the edge of Minas Ithil, where the river Anduin flows, its waters black, its song silenced by the chants that echo from the city. The fields of Ithilien are barren, the stars hidden by a haze that is not of the earth. The moon rises, but its light is twisted green and cold, a mockery of the light that once defined the city. The guards stand, their armor alive with runes, their hearts alive with worship. They are radiant, but they are not free. They are a city of light, but it is a light that consumes. In the heart of the city, Narmacil sits his throne, a pyre, his crown, a chain. He is a king, but he is also a man, and men are frail, prone to the allure of what shines. He sees the city's path, but he does not turn from it, for to turn would be to admit he was wrong, and false light does not yield. And in the east, the shadow smiles. The city is not yet Minas Morgul, but it is no longer Minas Ithil. It is something else, something new, something that carries the seed of its own destruction. The people are not yet lost, but they are losing their hearts, bound by the veil of false light, their souls drowning in the glow of their own blindness. As we leave this chapter of the tale, let us carry the echo of Serinde's words, the weight of Narmacil's blindness, the shadow of Vorondil's rights. The city stands, but it is crumbling, its true light, extinguished, its heart consumed by a radiance that is not its own. The shadow waits patient as death, cunning as the night, and the people in their worship draw it closer. What is the light we seek? What is the truth we deny? These are the questions that Minas Ithil asks, not just of its people, but of us all. The city is a mirror, a warning, a song that fades but does not end.
Let us walk on into the next chapter of this journey, where the shadow will take form and where the soul of Minas Ithil will face its final reckoning.
The tale of Minas Ithil descends deeper into the abyss, where the city's once luminous soul is all but extinguished, smothered by a darkness that cloaks itself in the guise of triumph. Its towers stand their stones now pulsing with a sickly green radiance, no longer reflecting the moon, but defying it with an unnatural glow. The white tree is a forgotten scar, its courtyard a profane altar where no memory of hope remains. The people move as if possessed, their eyes burning with a zeal that is not life but servitude, their hands bound to relics that promise eternity but deliver only chains. The question persists, relentless as a dirge. How does a city of moonlight become a citadel of fear? To answer, we must walk the final steps of the Third Age, where the shadow patient, as death cunning as a whisper, claims its prize, not with conquest, but with the surrender of the soul, the embrace of despair, and the choices that trade light for oblivion.
This is no mere recounting of a city's end, but a meditation on the moment we let go, the lies we accept, and the truths we betray when we choose the shadow over the struggle. Minas Ithil is a mirror reflecting the cost of yielding to despair, the peril of mistaking servitude for salvation, and the slow death of a heart that abandons its own light. Let us tread this path with heavy hearts, for the ground is broken, and the truths are as sharp as a blade forged in sorrow. The years have unmade Minas Ithil not in its walls but in its spirit. The city endures a fortress of stone and sorcery, its gates sealed with runes that hum with malice, its towers crowned with orbs that cast a green haze across the valley of Ithilien. Mordor stirs its fires, kindling its master's spirit, no longer a whisper, but a will gathering form in the east. The shadow is no longer a distant threat. It is here, woven into the city's rites, its dreams, its very breath. The men of Gondor, once bearers of Numenor's starlight, stand their watch, their armor alive with enchantments that bind them, their minds consumed by a vision of a city that will not merely rule, but devour. They are a people of fervor, of certainty, of a fire that burns not to illuminate but to consume, and in that fire they are lost. The kings who rule Minas Ithil are no longer the stewards of hope, nor the lords of glory who sought to rival the stars. They are shadows of themselves, their crowns aglow with a light that is not their own, their wills bent to a power they cannot name. They speak of Gondor's supremacy, of a city that will be eternal, a name that will echo through the void. They perform rites, embrace secrets, wield powers that promise invincibility but demand their souls. They are not yet Sauron's thralls, but they are his reflections, mirroring his hunger, his malice, his despair. This is the 51st truth. The shadow's final victory is not conquest, but surrender. It does not force the heart. It seduces it, offering release from struggle, certainty in place of doubt, power in place of pain. The men of Minas Ithil were not defeated. They yielded not to an enemy, but to a promise of rest, of strength, of an end to fear. But rest in the shadow is servitude. Strength in the shadow is chains, and the end of fear is the end of hope. In their surrender, the people of Minas Ithil became what they feared. Let us stand now in the heart of Minas Ithil, where the courtyard of the white tree lies defiled, its stones blackened by offerings that are no longer offerings, but tributes to a power unseen. The air is thick, alive with a hum that is not of the earth, its currents twisting like tendrils of a living thing. The people move with a purpose that is not their own, their faces sharp, their eyes glowing with a light that is not life, but hunger. The market is silent, its stalls empty, for trade has been replaced by devotion goods, by relics, voices by chants. The children do not chant. They serve their voices silent, their minds bound to a will that is not theirs. The priests are no longer priests. They are conduits. Their chants are summons to a power that answers with a malice that consumes the soul. The city breathes, but it is a breath of ash, a pyre that burns all it touches. In the great hall, the king let us name him Ernur, a name that carries the weight of Gondor's final fall, sits upon his throne, his presence a void that draws all light into itself. He is a man of power, his voice a command that bends reality, his will a force that shapes the world. He knows the history of Minas Ithil, its beauty, its wounds, its defiance. He knows the shadow that grows beyond the mountains, the enemy that is no longer a spirit, but a presence, a will that presses against the world. He vows to be the last king, the one who will make Minas Ithil eternal, a city that will defy death itself. But his vow is not of hope nor of glory. It is of despair, a surrender to a power he believes he can wield, but which wields him.
J.R.R.'s reign is one of darkness cloaked in light of acts that terrify as much as they awe. He builds no new towers, for the city's spires are now alive, their orbs pulsing with a green fire that warps the sky. He gathers no new seers, for the priests and sages have become one, their rites a single voice that shakes the earth. He speaks to his people, not of destiny, but of inevitability, of a city that will be forever a name that will outlast the world. He does not bow to the shadow, but he serves it, believing its power is his own, its light his to command. This is the 52nd truth. The shadow's light is a chain that binds the wearer first. J.R.R. was a king, but he was also a man, and men are frail, prone to the illusion of mastery. He saw his city's power, its radiance, its eternity, and he believed it was his creation. He did not see the cost, the souls that burned in its fire, the hearts that broke in its chains. He did not see because the shadow's light does not reveal. It consumes, cloaking the truth in a veil of despair. The shadow, ever patient, saw this surrender. It did not need to strike, for the city had opened its gates. It needed only to claim, to take what was offered, to bind what was given. The shadow came as a presence not in the night, but in the day, in the orbs that crowned the towers, in the relics that burned in the hands of the faithful, in the chants that filled the air with dread. It spoke of eternity, of a city that would be a god, of a people who would be beyond mortality. It offered power not to create, but to possess, to make Minas Ithil a name that would crush the world. And the people in their despair began to kneel. This was no sudden collapse, no moment of defeat. It was a slow unraveling, a surrender of the soul to a power that was not power, but servitude. The guards upon the walls bore armor that was no longer armor, but a second skin, its runes alive with a malice that drove them. The priests performed rites that tore the veil between worlds, their voices calling forth powers that answered with a hunger that devoured all. The people carried relics that were no longer relics, but shackles, their minds filled with visions of a city that would never die, a world that would serve them. They were not yet Sauron's slaves, but they were his shadows, reflecting his will, his hunger, his despair. One such man was Angmar, a figure who rose in J.R.R.'s court, his name a whisper that chilled the heart. Angmar was no man, some said, but a shadow given form, a priest who had transcended mortality, his eyes like voids, his voice a command that bent the soul. Angmar was not a servant of Sauron, not yet. He was a herald, a man who believed Minas Ithil was chosen to rule the world, to become a power beyond the valor. He delved into rites that no man should touch, crafting ceremonies that made the air scream, that made the stones of the city weep blood. He spoke to the King of Eternity, not as a dream, but as a truth, a reality that Minas Ithil could seize if it would only surrender. Angmar's rites were like a storm sweeping through the city, drowning all resistance in a tide of dread. He spoke of a new world, of a city that would be forever, of a people who would be gods. He did not speak of Sauron, but his words were Sauron's. His light was Sauron's, his hunger was Sauron's. And J.R.R. in his despair did not reject him. He listened, he watched, he allowed Angmar to weave his rites, believing that such power could be his, that it could save the city without destroying it. This is the 53rd truth. The shadow does not need to command, it needs only to be embraced. Angmar was not Sauron, but he was a vessel, a channel through which the shadow flowed. His rights, his visions, his despair, they were the threads that bound the city not with force but with surrender, wrapping it in a shroud of false eternity.
The city began to change, not in its form, but in its being. The towers burned with a light that was not of the world, their orbs casting a glow that twisted reality. The forges roared with a fire that was not of the earth, their smoke forming shapes that spoke, that commanded. The guards moved with a will that was not their own, their eyes glowing with a light that was not life, but death. The priests chanted their voices, a chorus that tore the heavens, their rites calling forth powers that answered with a malice that consumed all. The people lived, but their lives were a nightmare, their minds lost in a light that was not light, their souls bound by the power they had embraced. In the homes of Minas Ithil, the old ways were no more. The tales of Numenor, of the sea of the light that endures, these were erased, replaced by hymns of eternity, of a city that would be a god, of a people who would be beyond death. The children did not serve. They were consumed, their minds empty, their hearts bound to a will that was not theirs. The elders did not kneel. They vanished, their silence a final surrender to the tide that swept the city away.
This is the 54th truth. A city that surrenders its soul becomes the shadow. Minas Ithil was built on hope, on love, on the dream of a world made whole. But hope is frail, and love is fleeting, and dreams require strength to hold. The people of Minas Ithil chose power over strength, eternity over love, despair over hope. They did not fall. They knelt, their souls bound by the shadow they had embraced.
Let us pause now in the ghastly light of Minas Ithil's towers and consider the nature of surrender. It is not a defeat, not a battle lost, but a choice, a moment when the heart lets go, when the soul says no more. In Minas, Ithil's surrender was the city's end, its promise, its reason to endure. But surrender to the shadow is not rest. It is servitude, a binding of the soul to a power that does not give but takes. The people of Minas Ithil were not evil. They were broken, and brokenness seeks ease, even if that ease is chains.
The king J.R.R. felt this brokenness most keenly. He was a man of power, but his power was a lie, a city that shone with a light that was not its own. He saw the changes in his people, the fire in their eyes, the chains on their souls. He did not stop them, for to stop them would be to admit defeat, and defeat was a crack in the armor of a king. He believed he could wield the power, that he could shape the visions Angmar offered, without losing himself, without losing the city. But power cannot be wielded, and visions cannot be shaped. The rites, the orbs, the chants, they were not gifts, but prisons binding the city to the shadow it sought to defy. The people did not see this, for despair blinds the heart before the eyes. They saw only their eternity, their power, their right to be gods. They did not see the shadow that walked among them, cloaked in their own despair, laughing at their surrender. This is the 55th truth. The shadow does not need to bind. It needs only to be accepted. The people of Minas Ithil accepted the shadow not as a master, but as a savior, a promise of the eternity they craved. They did not see the chains, for they were forged in their own brokenness. They did not see the dark, for it was lit by their own despair. In this time a voice rose, faint as a dying ember, a final echo of the light that had once defined the city. His name was Mithrandir, a wanderer, a figure cloaked in grey, whose eyes held a light older than the stars. He was no king, no priest, but a bearer of wisdom, a flame that burned with the memory of Minas Ithil's soul. He walked the streets, his voice soft-speaking of the old ways, of the white tree of the light that came not from power, but from hope. Mithrandir did not speak of eternity nor of power. He spoke of love, of trust, of the courage to resist, to hold to the light, even when it seems lost. He told the tales of Eärendil, of the Silmaril, that shone for all of the valor who watched from afar. His words were like a star, small but piercing, seeking to break the shroud that cloaked the city's heart. For a moment his voice reached the people. The children looked up, their eyes flickering with something they could not name. The elders stirred their silence, broken by the memory of true light. The guards hesitated, their hands trembling on their relics, their minds turning to a world beyond the shadow. Mithrandir was no saviour, but he was a final chance, a spark of the light that had once been Minas Ithil's soul. But sparks are frail, and despair is a tide that drowns them. J.R.R. heard of Mithrandir's words, and he grew wroth. He was a king of power, of eternity, of a city that must be forever. He saw in Mithrandir's tales not hope, but weakness, not light, but folly. He summoned him to his hall, and there in the glow of his throne he spoke. "Your tales are fair," he said, "but they are not for this time. We need power, not memories. We need eternity, not songs. Be silent or be gone." Mithrandir stood, his eyes steady, his voice calm. "My king," he said, "a city without hope is no city at all. A people without light are already lost. I speak not to weaken but to save. I speak to remind you of the light that endures." His words were a challenge, not to the king's power, but to his despair, a plea to turn from the shadow. But despair does not yield, and J.R.R. in his wrath banished Mithrandir not to death, but to the wilds where his voice would not trouble the city's surrender. The people heard of Mithrandir's fate, and they did not speak. They loved his tales, but they loved their power more. They needed his hope, but they needed their eternity more. And so they turned away their silence, a final betrayal, not of Mithrandir, but of themselves. His words faded, his light drifted into the night, and the city fell deeper into the shadow's embrace. This is the 56th truth. The true light asks for struggle, but the shadow offers release. Mithrandir was a chance, a final moment to turn, to fight, to choose the light over the lie. But the people of Minas Ithil chose the lie not because they were evil, but because they were weary, and the shadow's promise of rest is stronger than the call to endure. The years passed, and the city became something else. The towers burned with a light that was not of the world, their orbs casting a glow that consumed the stars. The forges roared with a fire that was not of the earth, their smoke forming shapes that ruled that bound. The guards moved with a will that was not their own, their eyes empty, their hearts silent. The priests chanted their voices, a scream that tore the heavens, their rites calling forth a power that answered with a malice that devoured all. The people lived, but their lives were a shadow, their minds empty, their souls bound by the power they had surrendered to. J.R.R. ruled, but his rule was no longer his own. He was a king, but he was also a puppet bound by the power he had embraced, the light he had sought, the despair he had fed. He saw the changes in his city, the emptiness in his people, the darkness beneath their glow. He did not stop them, for to stop them would be to admit he was lost, and despair does not yield. And in the east the shadow rose. Sauron's spirit, now whole, took form, his will, a fire that burned across Mordor. He did not need to strike, for the city was his. He needed only to claim it, to name it, to make it his own. The lights in the east burned no brighter, for the city itself was the light green and cold, a beacon of the shadow's triumph. The whispers were silent, for there was no need to speak. The city was the shadow's voice, its hunger, its despair. This is the 57th truth. The shadow does not need to conquer. It needs only to be chosen. The people of Minas Ithil chose the shadow not as a lord, but as a light, a promise of the eternity they craved. They did not see the chains, for they were forged in their own despair. They did not see the dark, for it was their own. Let us walk now to the edge of Minas Ithil, where the river Anduin flows, its waters black as night, its song silenced by the screams that echo from the city. The fields of Ithilien are barren, the stars consumed by a haze that is not of the earth. The moon rises, but its light is gone, swallowed by the green glow that defines the city. The guards stand, their armor a living thing, their hearts empty. They are eternal, but they are not alive. They are a city of power, but they are a city of shadow. In the heart of the city J.R.R. sits, his throne a tomb, his crown a chain. He is a king, but he is also a man, and men are frail, prone to the allure of release. He sees the city's path, but he does not turn from it, for to turn would be to fight, and he is too weary to fight. And in the east the shadow claims its prize. The city is no longer Minas Ithil. It is Minas Morgul, the tower of sorcery. a citadel of fear, a monument to the shadow's triumph. The people are no longer people. They are shadows bound by the power they chose, the light they embraced, the despair they became. As we leave this chapter of the tale, let us carry the echo of Mithrandir's words, the weight of Eärnur's surrender, the shadow of Angmar's rights. The city has lost its light, extinguished, its heart consumed by the shadow it chose. The shadow stands patient as death, cunning as the night, and the people in their surrender have become its own. What is the light we choose? What is the struggle we abandon? These are the questions that Minas Ithil asks not just of its people, but of us all. The city is a mirror, a warning, a song that ends, but lingers in the silence. Let us walk on into the next chapter of this journey, where the shadow reigns, and where the memory of Minas Ithil will face its final test.
The tale of Minas Ithil, now Minas Morgul, lingers in the shadowed air, a dirge sung by a city that has forgotten its own voice. The towers stand their stones twisted into grotesque spires, their green glow a mockery of the moonlight that once caressed them. The white tree is no more its courtyard, a profane wound pulsing with a malice that seeps into the earth. The people are gone, replaced by wraiths and shadows, their forms bound to a will that is not their own, their eyes empty of all but hunger. The question remains a whisper in the silence. How does a city of radiance become a citadel of fear? To answer, we must walk the desolate paths of the Third Age, where Minas Morgul reigns as a monument to despair, yet where the echoes of its lost light still linger not in its stones, but in the hearts of those who remember, in the choices of those who resist, and in the faint hope that refuses to die.
This is no mere elegy for a fallen city, but a meditation on memory, redemption, and the fragile threads that bind us to the light, even when all seems lost. Minas Morgul is a mirror reflecting the cost of forgetting, the power of remembering, and the courage it takes to hold to hope in the face of overwhelming shadow. Let us tread this path with quiet resolve, for the ground is cursed and the truths are as delicate as a song on the wind. The years have entombed Minas Morgul, not in earth, but in a darkness that is more than night. The city stands a citadel of sorcery, its gates radiating a chill that freezes the soul, its towers crowned with orbs that burn with a green fire, casting a pall over the valley of Ithilien. Mordor is alive, its fires blazing. Its master returned Sauron's will, a tide that drowns the east. The shadow is no longer a presence. It is the city itself, its stones, its air, its silence. The men of Gondor are no more their legacy, erased, their descendants either fled or twisted into forms that serve the enemy. The guards are wraiths, their armor a shroud, their blades a curse. The priests are gone, replaced by spectres who chant in tongues that tear the fabric of the world. The people are shadows, their humanity stripped, their souls bound to the will of the Dark Lord. Yet even in this desolation, there is a memory, a faint echo of what was. Minas Morgul is not just a fortress of fear. It is a wound, a scar upon the world that speaks of choices made of light, forsaken of a city that once dreamed of beauty. The shadow rules, but it cannot erase the past, not entirely. In the silence of the city, in the spaces between its chants, there are whispers, songs of Numenor, tales of the white tree, dreams of a world made whole. These are not heard by the wraiths, nor felt by the stones, but they linger waiting for those who might listen, for those who might remember. This is the 58th truth: the shadow can claim the present, but it cannot unmake the past. Minas Morgul is a citadel of fear, but it is also a memory, a testament to what was lost and what might yet be reclaimed. The light of Minas Ithil is gone, but its echo remains not in the city, but in the world beyond, in the hearts of those who refuse to forget. Let us stand now at the edge of Minas Morgul, where the river Anduin flows, its waters black as ink, its song silenced by the city's malevolent hum. The fields of Ithilien are barren, their flowers withered, their trees twisted into shapes of agony. The moon hides its light, swallowed by the green haze that spills from the city's towers. The air is heavy, pressing against the chest, whispering of despair, of surrender, of the futility of hope.
Yet even here, in this place of utter shadow, there is a flicker, a memory that refuses to die.
In the world beyond, the memory of Minas Ithil lives. In the halls of Minas Tirith, the sister city, the white tree still stands, its branches frail but alive, its roots fed by the hope of Gondor. In the songs of the elves, in the lore of Rivendell and Lothlorien, the tale of Minas Ithil is sung not as a tragedy, but as a warning, a call to hold to the light. In the hearts of men scattered across Middle-earth, there are those who remember the city of the moon, who tell its stories, who dream of its redemption. These are not great lords nor mighty warriors, but ordinary souls, farmers, poets, wanderers, who carry the echo of Minas Ithil in their hearts, a spark that the shadow cannot touch. One such soul is Eloria, a woman of Ithilien, a ranger who walks the wilds where the city's light once shone. She is no queen, no sage, but her heart is a flame, small but unyielding, that burns with the memory of Minas Ithil's soul. Eloria knows the tales of the city, its founding, its beauty, its fall. She has seen Minas Morgul from afar, its green glow, a wound upon the world, its presence, a weight that presses against her spirit. Yet she does not despair. She walks the paths of Ithilien, tending its hidden glades, singing its forgotten songs, keeping alive the memory of a land that was once fair. Eloria's songs are soft sung in the twilight beneath the stars that still shine over Ithilien. She sings of the white tree of the moonlight on the river of the men who built a city to defy the dark. She tells the tales of Númenor, of Eärendil's star of the hope that endures even when all seems lost. Her words are a thread fragile but unbroken, weaving a tapestry of memory that holds back the shadow's tide. She does not fight with swords nor challenge the wraiths of Minas Morgul, but her songs are a resistance, a refusal to let the city's light be forgotten. This is the 59th truth: memory is a weapon against the shadow. The shadow can bind the present, twist the future, but it cannot erase the memory of light, not as long as one heart holds it, one voice sings it, one soul refuses to yield. Eloria is not alone. There are others scattered across Middle-earth who carry the memory of Minas Ithil, who keep its echo alive in the face of despair. In the shadow of Minas Morgul, the world moves on. The War of the Ring looms its currents, stirring the hearts of men, elves and dwarves. In the councils of the wise, in the halls of Rivendell, the fate of Middle-earth is debated, and the memory of Minas Ithil is invoked not as a lost cause, but as a lesson, a warning of what happens when light is forsaken, when pride and hunger lead to surrender. The wise do not speak of reclaiming the city, for its stones are cursed, its air poisoned, its soul bound to Sauron's will. But they speak of its memory, of the hope it once held, of the courage it demands of those who would resist the shadow. In this time, a figure emerges, one whose name will echo through the ages, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir of Isildur. He is no king yet, but a ranger, a wanderer who walks the wilds, his heart heavy with the legacy of his fathers. Aragorn knows the tale of Minas Ithil, for it is his tale, the tale of his line of the men who built a city of light and let it fall. He carries this weight not as a burden, but as a call, a challenge to be more than his fathers, to hold to the light where they faltered. Aragorn walks the paths of Ithilien, where Eloria sings, and their paths cross in a glade hidden from the shadow's gaze. He hears her songs, her tales, and his heart stirs, for they are the songs of his people, the tales of his blood. Eloria does not know him as a king, but as a man, a fellow keeper of memory, a soul who refuses to let the light die. They speak not of war, but of hope, of the white tree of the city that might have been. Aragorn listens, and in her words he finds a spark, a reminder of why he fights, why he endures, why he dares to dream of a world made whole. This is the 60th truth: the light lives in those who remember. Aragorn and Eloria are not saviors, not alone, but they are bearers of memory, carriers of a light that the shadow cannot extinguish. Their songs, their stories, their hope, they are a defiance, a challenge to the despair that Minas Morgul embodies,
a refusal to let the city's fall be the end of its tale.
Yet Minas Morgul itself is not silent. The city is alive, a living wound, its malice, a force that reaches beyond its walls. The Nazgul, Sauron's ringwraiths, rule its towers, their presence a terror that chills the heart. The Witch King of Angmar, once perhaps a man like Angmar of Eärnur's court, now a spectre of unimaginable dread, holds court in the city's heart, his will a blade that cuts through hope. The orbs atop the towers pulse their green fire, a beacon that draws the shadow's servants, orcs, trolls, and worse from the depths of Mordor. The city is a fortress, a weapon, a symbol of Sauron's triumph, and its shadow stretches across Middle-earth, a reminder of what awaits those who falter. The people of Gondor, those who fled or survived, speak of Minas Morgul in whispers, calling it the Tower of Sorcery, the Dead City. They do not approach its valley, for to do so is to court madness, to feel the weight of a despair that crushes the soul. The river Anduin shuns the city, its waters turning away as if unwilling to touch its cursed shores. The stars hide, the winds flee, and the world itself seems to recoil from the city's presence. Yet even in this rejection there is a memory, a recognition that Minas Morgul is not just a place, but a tragedy, a story that must not be forgotten. This is the 61st truth: the shadow's triumph is never complete. Minas Morgul is a citadel of fear, but it is also a reminder, a wound that speaks of loss of choices, of the light that was forsaken. The shadow can rule, but it cannot erase the echo of what was, the memory of what might have been. That memory lives not in the city, but in the world, in the hearts of those who resist, in the songs of those who hope. Let us walk now through the memory of Minas Ithil, through the tales that linger in the world beyond. In the halls of Minas Tirith, the stewards of Gondor guard the white tree, their hearts heavy with the loss of their sister city. They do not speak of reclaiming Minas Morgul, for its shadow is too great, but they speak of enduring, of holding to the light that remains. In the songs of the elves, the tale of Minas Ithil is a lament, a melody that weaves through their fading years, a reminder of the fragility of men and the courage it takes to stand against the dark. In the wilds of Ithilien, Eloria sings her voice, a thread that binds the past to the present, the lost to the living. Aragorn carries this memory as he walks the paths of Middle-earth, his heart set on a greater task, the destruction of the One Ring, the unmaking of Sauron's power. He does not seek to reclaim Minas Morgul, for its stones are cursed, its soul bound to the shadow. But he seeks to honor its memory, to fight for the world that Minas Ithil once dreamed of, a world of light, of hope, of beauty. His journey is not just a war against Sauron, but a redemption of his line, a chance to mend the choices that led to the city's fall. In the shadows of Ithilien, Eloria meets others who share her task, rangers, wanderers, souls who refuse to let the shadow have the final word. They are few, their voices soft, but their songs are a defiance, a refusal to let Minas Ithil's light be forgotten. They tend the hidden glades, they guard the secret paths, they keep alive the memory of a land that was once fair. They do not fight the Nazgul, nor storm the gates of Minas Morgul, but they resist their memory, a weapon that the shadow cannot break. This is the 62nd truth. Resistance is not always a sword, but a song. The shadow can crush armies, bind cities, twist souls, but it cannot silence the song of memory, the echo of light that lives in those who refuse to yield. Eloria, Aragorn, the Rangers of Ithilien. They are not victors, not yet, but they are keepers, guardians of a hope that endures even in the shadow's heart. In the heart of Minas Morgul, the shadow reigns. The Witch King sits upon a throne of bone, his presence a void that devours light. The orbs pulse their green fire, a call to the shadow's servants, a warning to the world beyond. The chants rise, a chorus of despair that tears the air, summoning powers that answer with a malice that consumes all. The city is a weapon, a fortress, a symbol of Sauron's dominion, and its shadow stretches across Middle-earth, a tide that seeks to drown all hope. Yet, even in this heart of darkness, there is a crack, a flaw in the shadow's triumph. The memory of Minas Ithil lingers not in the city but in the world, in the songs of Eloria, in the resolve of Aragorn, in the courage of those who resist. The shadow cannot erase this memory, for it is not bound to stones nor to towers, but to hearts, to voices, to the will that refuses to break. The city is lost, but its story is not, and in that story there is a hope that the shadow cannot touch. This is the 63rd truth. The shadow's power is great, but its victory is fragile. Minas Morgul is a citadel of fear, but it is also a wound, a reminder of what was lost and what might yet be won. The shadow can bind the city, but it cannot bind the memory of its light, not as long as one soul remembers, one voice sings, one heart holds to hope. Let us pause now in the shadow of Minas Morgul's towers and consider the nature of memory. It is not a weapon, not a shield, but a flame, small but unyielding, that burns even in the darkest night. In Minas Morgul, memory is the city's last defiance, its final gift to the world, a call to remember, to resist, to hope. The people of Minas Ithil are gone, their choices made, their light forsaken. But their story lives not in their city, but in those who carry it, who sing it, who fight for it. Eloria sings in the wilds, her voice a thread that binds the past to the future. Aragorn walks the paths of Middle-earth, his heart set on a task greater than any city yet shaped by the memory of Minas Ithil's fall. The rangers of Ithilien guard the hidden glades, their silence a song, their steps a defiance. They are not many, but they are enough, for memory needs only one heart to live, one voice to endure. This is the 64th truth: the light endures in those who carry it. Minas Morgul is a citadel of fear, but it is also a challenge, a call to remember, to resist, to hold to the light that the city lost. The shadow can claim the city, but it cannot claim the world, not as long as memory lives, as hope endures, as love refuses to die. As we leave this chapter of the tale, let us carry the echo of Eloria's songs, the weight of Aragorn's resolve, the memory of Minas Ithil's light. The city is lost, its soul bound to the shadow, its stones a monument to despair. But its story is not over, its light not wholly gone. The shadow reigns, but it is not eternal, and the memory of Minas Ithil lives, a spark that waits for the moment to kindle anew. What is the memory we carry? What is the hope we hold? These are the questions that Minas Morgul asks, not just of its people, but of us all. The city is a mirror, a warning, a song that lingers in the silence. Let us walk on into the final chapter of this journey, where the shadow will face its reckoning, and where the memory of Minas Ithil will find its revelation. The tale of Minas Ithil, now Minas Morgul, reaches its final cadence, a melody that trembles on the edge of silence, yet refuses to be wholly lost. The city stands a grotesque monument to shadow, its spires, twisted its green glow, a wound upon the world, its stones humming with a malice that defies the stars. The white tree is a forgotten dream, its courtyard a desecrated void, where no echo of hope dares linger. The people are no more, their forms consumed or twisted into wraiths that serve the Dark Lord's will, their souls bound to a hunger that knows no end. The question, ancient and unyielding, sings its last note. How does a city of moonlight become a citadel of fear? To answer, we must walk the twilight paths of the Third Age's end, where Minas Morgul looms as Sauron's stronghold, yet where the memory of its light, carried in songs, in hearts, in acts of defiance, flickers still, not to reclaim the city, but to weave a new song, a revelation that fades not into despair, but into eternity. This is no mere conclusion to a city's tragedy, but a meditation on endings, beginnings, and the fragile hope that binds them. Minas Morgul is a mirror reflecting the cost of choices made, the power of choices yet to come, and the courage to sing when the world is silent. Let us tread this final path with reverence, for the ground is sacred, and the truths are as luminous as a star in the dawn. Minas Morgul reigns in the valley of Ithilien, a citadel of terror, its presence a blight that poisons the earth. Its towers pulse with a green fire, their orbs casting a haze that chokes the stars, their shadows stretching like claws toward the west. The river Anduin shuns the city, its waters dark and still, its song silenced by the chants that rise from the cursed stones. The fields of Ithilien are desolate, their beauty twisted, their life drained by the shadow's hunger. Mordor burns its fires, a furnace, its master Sauron, a will that seeks to crush the world. The Nazgul, led by the Witch King, rule Minas Morgul, their screams a chorus that shatters hope, their blades a promise of despair. The city is no longer a place. It is a weapon, a wound, a symbol of the shadow's triumph. Yet even in this heart of darkness, there is a memory, an echo of Minas Ithil's light, not in the city itself, but in the world beyond. The shadow has claimed the stones, the towers, the souls of those who dwelt within, but it cannot claim the song, the story, the hope that lives in those who remember. Minas Morgul is a citadel of fear, but it is also a testament, a scar that speaks of choices of loss of the light that was forsaken. In its silence, in the spaces between its malice, there are whispers, faint, fragile, yet unbroken, of a city that once dreamed, that once loved, that once shone. This is the 65th truth: the shadow can bind the body, but it cannot silence the soul. Minas Morgul is a fortress of despair, but its story is not ended, not as long as one heart carries its memory, one voice sings its song, one soul dares to hope. The light of Minas Ithil is lost, but its echo endures, a thread that weaves through the world, waiting for those who will take it up. Let us walk now in the world beyond Minas Morgul, where the War of the Ring unfolds, its tides sweeping across Middle-earth. In the halls of Minas Tirith, the white tree stands, its branches bare but alive, a symbol of Gondor's endurance. In the glades of Lothlorien, Galadriel sings of the past, her voice a lament for Minas Ithil, a warning for the present. In the councils of Rivendell, Elrond speaks of the city's fall, not as a defeat, but as a call to resist, to hold to the light where others faltered. Across the lands, men, elves and dwarves gather, their hearts stirred by a hope that defies the shadow's might. The memory of Minas Ithil lives not in its cursed stones, but in the courage of those who fight for a world it once dreamed of. In the wilds of Ithilien, Eoloria continues her vigil, her songs a defiance of the shadow's reign. She walks the hidden paths, tending the secret glades, keeping alive the memory of a land that was fair. Her voice is soft, but it carries weaving through the trees, reaching the hearts of those who listen. She sings of the white tree of the moonlight, on the river of the men, who built a city to hold back the dark. She tells the tales of Númenor, of Eärendil's star, of the hope that endures even in the shadow's heart. Her songs are not a battle cry, but a prayer, a reminder that the light lives not in victory, but in memory, in love, in the courage to sing when all is lost. Eoloria is not alone. The rangers of Ithilien, led by Faramir, son of Denethor, guard the land, their steps silent, their hearts fierce with hope. Faramir knows the tale of Minas Ithil, for it is Gondor's tale, a wound upon his people's soul. He walks the paths where Eoloria sings, and her songs stir him, reminding him of why he fights, why he endures. He does not seek to reclaim Minas Morgul, for its shadow is too great, but he seeks to honor its memory, to protect the land it once loved, to keep alive the hope it once held. This is the 66th truth. Hope is not a weapon, but a song. The shadow can crush armies, twist cities, bind souls, but it cannot silence the song of hope, the melody that lives in those who refuse to yield. Eoloria and Faramir are not conquerors, but keepers, guardians of a light that shines even in the shadow's dominion. In this time, the War of the Ring reaches its climax. Frodo Baggins, a hobbit of the Shire, bears the One Ring, the heart of Sauron's power, toward Mount Doom. His journey is not for Minas Morgul, but it passes through its shadow, through the valley of Ithilien, where the city's malice presses against his heart. Frodo feels the weight of Minas Morgul, its green glow, a terror that threatens to break him. Yet he is not alone. Samwise Gamgee, his friend, walks beside him, his heart a flame that holds back the dark. Sam does not know the full tale of Minas Ithil, but he knows hope, he knows love, and in his simple courage he carries the echo of the city's light. As Frodo and Sam pass through Ithilien, they meet Faramir and his rangers, and Eorlia's songs linger in the air, a faint melody that strengthens their resolve. Faramir speaks to Frodo of Gondor, of its history of the city that was lost. He does not speak of reclaiming Minas Morgul, but of resisting its shadow, of fighting for the world it once dreamed of. His words are a gift, a reminder that the light endures not in stones, but in hearts, in choices, in the courage to go on. Frodo's journey leads him to the stairs of Cirith Ungol, the pass guarded by Minas Morgul's malice. The city's presence is a weight, its green fire a terror that claws at his soul. Yet even here in the shadow's heart there is a memory, a flicker of light. Frodo carries the phial of Galadriel, a star-glass that holds the light of Eärendil, the same light that once inspired the men of Minas Ithil. When the shadow threatens to consume him, he holds the phial aloft, and its light pierces the dark, a reminder of the hope that endures, of the song that refuses to fade. This is the 67th truth. The light is never wholly lost. Minas Morgul is a citadel of fear, but its shadow cannot extinguish the light that lives in those who carry it, who sing it, who fight for it. Frodo, Sam, Faramir, Eolia. They are not saviors, but bearers, keepers of a hope that shines even in the darkest night. In the heart of Minas Morgul, the Witch King rules, his presence a void that devours all. The city is a fortress, its gates a moor, its towers a scream. The Nazgul ride forth their cries, a terror that shatters armies, their blades, a promise of death. The city marches to war, its shadow a tide that seeks to drown Gondor, to crush the hope of men. The orbs pulse their green fire, a call to Sauron's servants, a warning to the world that the shadow is eternal, that resistance is futile. Yet the shadow is not eternal. In the fields of Pelennor, before the gates of Minas Tirith, the Witch King falls slain by Éowyn of Rohan and Merry, a hobbit of the Shire. His death is not the end of Minas Morgul, but it is a crack in the shadow's armour, a moment when the light pierces the dark. Éowyn and Merry do not know the full tale of Minas Ithil, but their courage is its echo, their defiance, a song that carries the city's lost hope. In the east, Frodo and Sam reach Mount Doom, and the One Ring is destroyed. Sauron's will crumbles his power, unmade his shadow scattered. Minas Morgul does not fall, not with a crash of stone or a clash of swords, but with a silence, a sudden emptiness. As the Nazgul vanish, their orbs dim, their chants cease. The city stands, but it is hollow, its malice drained, its green fire extinguished. The shadow is gone, but the wound remains a scar upon the world that speaks of choices of loss of a city that was once light. This is the 68th truth. The shadow's reign is fragile, for it is built on lies. Minas Morgul was a citadel of fear, but its power was bound to Sauron, and when Sauron fell, its shadow fell with him. The city remains, but it is no longer a weapon, no longer a terror, no longer a symbol of despair. It is a memory, a testament to what was and what might yet be. The War of the Ring ends, and Middle-earth begins to heal. In Minas Tirith, Aragorn, now king, stands beneath the white tree, its branches blooming anew, a sign of Gondor's renewal. He does not march to Minas Morgul, for its stones are cursed, its air poisoned by centuries of shadow. But he carries its memory, a weight that shapes his rule, a reminder of the choices that led to its fall and the choices that led to its redemption. Aragorn's reign is not one of conquest, but of healing, of mending the wounds of the past, of weaving a new song for the future. In Ithilien, Faramir and Eolia work to restore the land, their hands tending the glades, their voices singing the songs of old. The valley begins to bloom, its flowers returning, its trees standing tall. The shadow of Minas Morgul lingers, but it is a shadow, only a memory that fades as the light grows. Eoloria's songs are no longer a defiance, but a celebration, a melody that weaves the past into the present, the lost into the found. Faramir, now Prince of Ithilien, walks beside her, his heart light with the hope that Minas Ithil once held, a hope that lives again in the land it loved. The city itself stands empty, its towers silent, its gates open to the wind. No one dwells within, for its stones carry the weight of too much sorrow, too much shadow. Yet it is not destroyed, for to destroy it would be to forget, and forgetting is a victory for the shadow. Minas Morgul remains a scar, a warning, a memory that speaks to those who pass by, who hear its tale, who carry its song. This is the 69th truth. Redemption is not restoration, but renewal. Minas Morgul cannot be Minas Ithil again, for its light is gone, its soul changed. But its memory can be redeemed, its hope reborn, its song woven into a new world. The city is a wound, but wounds can heal, not to erase the scar, but to make it a story, a testament to the light that endures. Let us pause now in the silence of Minas Morgul's towers and consider the nature of endings. They are not conclusions, not final chords, but transitions, moments when one song fades and another begins. Minas Morgul is an ending, a city lost to shadow, a light extinguished by choices made in fear, pride, and despair. But it is also a beginning, a call to remember, to resist, to hope. Its tale is not one of defeat but of revelation, a truth that shines through the dark. The light endures not in stones but in hearts, in songs, in the courage to go on. The memory of Minas Ithil lives in Eloria's songs, in Faramir's stewardship, in Aragorn's reign. It lives in Frodo's sacrifice, in Sam's loyalty, in Eowyn's courage. It lives in the white tree of Minas Tirith, in the glades of Ithilien, in the stars that shine over Middle-earth. The city is gone, but its song is not its hope, not lost its light, not forgotten. The shadow claimed Minas Ithil, but it could not claim its soul, for that soul lives in those who remember, who sing, who love. This is the 70th truth. The light is a song that never ends. Minas Morgul is a citadel of fear, but its tale is a song of hope, a melody that weaves through the ages, carried by those who refuse to let it fade. The shadow can bind it, can twist it, can consume, but it cannot silence the song. The light that lives in those who choose it, who carry it, who sing it into the dawn. As we stand at the end of this journey, let us carry the memory of Minas Ithil not as a city, but as a question, a challenge, a song. What is the light we hold? What is the shadow we resist? What is the song we sing? These are the truths that Minas Morgul offers not just to its people, but to us all. The city is a mirror reflecting the choices we make, the hopes we cherish, the courage we summon when the world grows dim. The tale of Minas Ithil does not end with Minas Morgul's fall, nor with Sauron's defeat. It ends with a revelation, a truth that fades not into silence but into memory, into hope, into a song that lingers in the heart. The city is lost, its stones cursed, its light extinguished, but its song lives, its hope endures, its light shines in those who carry it, who sing it, who weave it into a new world. Let us leave Minas Morgul now, its towers silent, its shadow broken, its memory alive. Let us walk into the dawn where the stars still shine, where the white tree blooms, where the songs of Ithilien rise. The shadow is gone, but the light remains not in victory, but in love, in hope, in the courage to sing when all is silent. The tale of Minas Ithil fades, but it does not end, for its song is ours, its light ours, its hope ours to carry, to sing, to weave into eternity. This is the final truth. The light is ours to sing. Minas Morgul is a warning, a wound, a memory. But it is also a promise, a call to hold to the light, to sing the song, to weave the hope that endures. The city is gone, but its tale is not its light, not lost its song, not silenced. Let us carry it, let us sing it, let us weave it into a world that shines not with the green fire of despair, but with the starlight of hope, the moonlight of love, the dawnlight of courage. And so the song fades, not into silence but into memory, into a world that sings into a light that never ends.